Pokémon, medicine and martial arts. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 1051 End. Ouch, a dull boom echoed. This raging, soaring water dragon radiated the full force of Blastoise. Its speed, precision, and ferocity were enough to describe the power of this attack. Charizard, in mid-air, could only watch helplessly as the water dragon, with unstoppable force, gradually pushed back his jet of flames, its flames growing larger and larger in his eyes until they completely covered his pupils. By this point, Charizard was completely unconscious, allowing his body to plummet from mid-air. However, at this very moment, Blastoise seized the opportunity and unleashed a full-strength attack, knocking Charizard out of action. Dragonite was equally swift, seizing the moment and landing a perfect 100,000-volt strike on Blastoise. Furthermore, his lightning palm swiftly attacked Blastoise, swiftly retracting the attack that had just appeared. The arcs crackled, and Blastoise ultimately couldn't escape. Under the combined power of the electric-type abilities, the shock left its skin ripped and bruised. Therefore, it could be considered a mental failure. Xiongnatua once again seized the opportunity and unleashed psychic-type attacks like telekinesis, illusion light, and intense mental strength. Blasted, using high-speed spin to escape quickly, Snow Leopard remained calm and composed in the face of such a critical situation. After carefully analyzing the pros and cons, he quickly issued the final order. High-speed spin was indeed a versatile skill, capable of both offense and defense. Even in this situation, it could still escape the blockade. However, Blastoise wasn't in good condition, panting and looking extremely weak. This was understandable, given the speed, and most of the abilities used to counter Blastoise were electric type. Just now, Blastoise had been hit by a massive set of electric attacks. Even under these circumstances, the fact that Blastoise didn't immediately lose its combat capability was a testament to its strength. Snow Leopard is giving you one more chance. Admit defeat. You're no match for us. Even if you manage to escape, we can still spare you. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life in the Alliance prison. Whether you can capture me is still uncertain. You're expecting me to surrender immediately after this? You're overthinking it, Snow Leopard scoffed at Kaluna's solemn words. Kalunaya, why are you still wasting your time with him? If someone's so clueless, let him beat you until he's completely defeated. Ho, come on, I'm not afraid of you. Dragonite uses 100,000 volts, Garvito uses illusion light, Blastostine uses freeze ray. Blastoise tried to immediately use her weapon skills to block, but under the pressure of the two skills, although she managed to use freeze ray, it only held off the attack for a moment. Blastoise's massive body was instantly sent flying backwards, its path plowing a deep dent in the ground, cracked and etched everywhere, looking as if it could collapse or sink at any moment. The entire platform was already beginning to tremble. However, this did not in the least dampen Tao's resolve to see Dragonite completely defeated Blastoise. Although already accustomed to its own weight, the repeated injuries made even Blastoise struggling to hold itself up, despite its already severely injured frame. Facing the attacks of Dragonite and Gardevoir, it could only resist without resistance, taking them all. This further inflicted further damage on Blastoise's already severely injured body. However, Watery and Kaluna grew increasingly appreciative of the Blastoise before them. With each knockdown, Blastoise would rise again, reigning supreme, attempting to once again brace its massive frame like a mountain of strength. But ultimately, its strength was running out, and it fell again and again. Blastoise, Snow Leopard, having witnessed this, hadn't shown any initial indifference. He had already rushed to Blastoise's side, attempting to help it up. But often, in such moments, as Dragonite and Gardevoir attacked, Blastoise would shield its trainer in its generous, though not quite warm, embrace. Using its massive body, it blocked the aftermath of the attack that had harmed its master, along with all the damage. Blustowed, that's enough. That's enough. Even the Snow Leopard, with his temper, couldn't help but cry out in grief. Witnessing this, Watery and Kalno felt hesitant to allow Dragonite and Gardevoir to continue their attacks. While they felt a pity for missing such a good opportunity, they were both decent figures after all. How could they imitate the villains and resort to the so-called corpse whipping? Blustoad, that's enough. I've seen your performance, but let's admit defeat. You've tried hard enough. Is it me, the trainer, who's the problem? Return to your Pokeball and rest. The Snow Leopard, with trembling hands, pulled out his own Pokeball, intending to add Blastoise to it. However, upon seeing his trainer's action, Blastoise's initially subdued mood suddenly became excited, shaking its massive head frantically. Blitzkrieg, no, Blastoise, you must listen to me this time. Go back to your Pokeball and rest, even if it means you won't fail just this once. The mission failed, so be it, but I don't want to lose you, my friend, just because of one mission. The scene before them was straight out of a movie. Watery and Carino couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Even Carino, a movie star, couldn't help but give the Snow Leopard a thumbs up. Such genuine emotion. But this is also a good learning opportunity. I'll have to take note of it. What should Carino do now? Let's wait for the Alliance to arrive. Things have come to this point now, and it's not up to us two to decide. Carino sighed helplessly. Perhaps things had been easy to resolve at the beginning, but now, almost everywhere she looked, flames of war were raging. Even Twilight, gazing across the conference hall at distant spots, saw flames already rising to the sky, accompanied by alarm bells. Chapter 1052 Black Robe Figure. Alice, I never imagined that this evil organization, would be so brazen. It's even gotten so far, they're no longer just stealthily rebelling, they've openly begun attacking Alliance-controlled cities. Taking in the surroundings, also seemed resigned. I don't know why, but I have a feeling this isn't over yet. Since they're an organization, they're acting so brazenly now. But after such a defeat, they can't just back down. That's right, they even dare to attack a global city like Myre. Then other ordinary towns wouldn't be able to withstand it. Karuna and Du seemed to have forgotten about the nearby Snow Leopard and Blastoise, lost in their own discussion about the subsequent developments of this incident. Meanwhile, the 8 captains of the organization, after their defeat, seemed deeply shaken. They stood there, their eyes lost in thought, their thoughts etched in a daze. Even Snow Leopard, the strongest of the 8 captains on duty, failed to notice the figure's arrival. Snow Leopard, my most loyal warrior. What's wrong with you? This isn't like you, a commanding voice boomed, and when Snow Leopard came to his senses, he felt a broad hand resting on his shoulder. Who is it? Kaluna and Watery finally noticed the sudden appearance, and cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. They hadn't noticed when this person had appeared. The champion of the Kalos region and the Dragon King of the Kanto region? Did you defeat my most powerful subordinate? It's a bit interesting, but it's not impressive after all. The man glanced up at Kaluna and Watery before returning his gaze to the Snow Leopard at his feet. Kaluna and Watery felt a chill run down their spines at the sight of the man. Although they felt a certain displeasure at the man's attitude, out of concern, they didn't show it. Their slightly tense bodies betrayed their current state of mind. Chief, upon seeing the figure, the Snow Leopard's eyes lost all trace of dejection. Instead, there was only respect and admiration. It was for no other reason than that Snow Leopard had achieved his current status. It was because he was one of the first to follow the leader. Why aren't you going to get up? Are you planning on staying down? The leader seemed to be joking, but his words were filled with immense authority. Upon hearing this, the Snow Leopard climbed back to his feet without hesitation. All right, retract your Blastoise body. I'll take care of everything else. If you can't even perform a mission properly, what good are you? Hearing the fury suffusing the leader's words, the Snow Leopard was instantly frightened and silent, lowering his head in shame. Even Blastoise seemed to share the same fear as the leader. He had also heard the leader's orders to his trainer, and immediately, without the previous resistance, he disengaged his Mega Evolution with a beep and obediently let the Snow Leopard take him back into his Pokeball. Alright, now it's time to deal with you guys who've tried to sabotage our plans. If you have any last words, please say them as soon as possible. The leader sounded relentless. Stop the nonsense. Let's fight. Are we afraid of you? Stop your pretense, Dragonite. Use 100,000 volts. You're asking for your own death? Faced with such a provocation, the leader simply snorted and pulled out a device, something resembling 3D glasses, and placed it on his nose. Then, with a wave of his hand, a dark figure suddenly appeared. It was also clad in a black robe, its entire face shrouded by the robe, making it impossible to see its features. Even this sudden action left everyone present with a sense of invisible pressure. The most pronounced sensation was undoubtedly felt by those closest to the black-robed figure. This was also the most direct experience, an invisible pressure, like an invisible mountain bearing down on his heart. After a whirlwind of emotions, he felt even more oppressive. What the hell is this thing? I don't know, it's completely covered by the black robe. But one thing is certain, it must be something formidable. Facing the attacks of Dragonite and Gardevoir, the black-robed figure raised his arm and gently waved it before him, creating a barrier. Dragonite's attack was instantly blocked by this invisible barrier. Furthermore, the invisible force that had blocked the 100,000-volt attack enveloped it, controlling it. However, the black-robed figure seemed in no hurry to attack, simply controlling the enveloping 100,000-volt energy. Even the battle-hardened Dragonite was stunned by this sight, hesitant to launch further attacks, fearing what might happen next. Kalno was also hesitant to act rashly, afraid to join the fray with Gardevoir. Did she see what was happening before her? The black-robed figure clutched lightning, brimming with immense might. Even if it stood there doing nothing, an invisible pressure emanated continuously. "Chief, is this the ultimate product of our research?" Snow Leopard asked hesitantly, unable to believe that the figure before him could possess such terrifying power. The chief didn't respond, simply nodding coldly and sneering at Kalno and Watery, whose expressions had turned sullen. "You'd better surrender. You're no match for my darling, aren't you? Perhaps I can even let you go." Chapter 1053 Unknown Pokémon. The leader tried to coax the champion, the king, into surrendering. It wasn't out of pity, but rather a desire to recruit these two men. After all, for them, these two might not be as powerful as their own secret weapons, but they were already far more powerful than even half of them. Dream on, surrender? I don't even have that word in my vocabulary. Faced with yet another rejection, the leader's temper waned. While he remained silent, his actions made his stance clear. However, as he instructed, the black-robed figure before him remained unmoved, still clutching a 100,000-volt battery. A dull nasal sound escaped him, and the leader finally removed his hood, revealing his true features. Beneath the hood was an unremarkable young man. If it weren't for that aura, one would mistake him for an ordinary individual. Yet, the vicissitudes of life in his eyes gave the impression of someone with a rich history. However, as he looked at the black-robed figure in front of him, his eyes were filled with hostility. He immediately pulled out a device resembling a remote control and, without further ado, pressed a few buttons. The black-robed figure, previously indifferent, suddenly sprang into action. He swung the 100,000-volt weapon, which he had been tightly gripping, with a swift thrust. With even greater speed than when he had come, he attacked directly towards Dragonite and Gardevoir. The black-robed figure's movement caused the robe, draped across his body, to be blown away by the sheer speed. At this moment, the figure hidden beneath the robe was revealed. However, after seeing the figure in full, Watery and Kaluna had no time to scrutinize the other Pokémon's faces. Instead, their gazes were fixed on the 100,000-volt energy it had flung back. Gardevoir uses Mirror Reflect, Dragonite uses Dragon Wave, but they had ultimately underestimated the sheer force of the 100,000-volt energy. After being flung back by this unknown Pokémon, the 100,000-volt energy's power gradually intensified. Layer after layer of barriers were breached, and sonic booms echoed through the air. Although Kaluna and Watery had already issued the order, the two Pokémon were already reacting to the danger before their trainer's orders, employing their abilities to block it. However, the 100,000-volt energy returned too quickly, and under the powerful explosion, Dragonite and Gardevoir, who had attempted to defend themselves, were instantly blown away by the immense force. They crashed heavily onto the ground not far behind their respective trainers, creating a deep crater that made the once seemingly stable platform seem precarious. Two blinding flashes of light shone, and both Pokémon simultaneously exited their Mega Evolution forms. While not enough to render them incapable of combat, they were now too weak to offer any resistance. Ignoring Watery and Kaluna, who had already rushed over to check on Dragonite and Gardevoir, both were completely focused on their own Pokémon. They didn't think much of the scene before them, at most finding it baffling. But Snow Leopard, a trainer who had just battled the two, saw it all clearly. His mouth was already gaping, almost enough to fit a Pokémon egg. That's too strong. It only used one move. While it's possible that Dragonite and Gardevoir expended too much energy in the previous battle, it's impossible for a Pokémon to defeat them with just one move, leader. If that's the case, then our experiment is truly a success. Then achieving our goals and dreams is a sure thing. Snow Leopard gazed at his leader with a burning gaze, still obsessed with their original goals and dreams. In response to the question of his currently strongest subordinate, Leader Doggy nodded, but that was all. After confirming that Dragonite and Gardevoir were alright, Karuna and Watery finally had the energy to examine the Pokémon. However, after carefully examining the Pokémon's face, they were both stunned. Although they weren't Pokémon doctors, their knowledge of Pokémon research was limited. But they were all regional champions. While their knowledge of Pokémon might not be comprehensive, they knew most of them. But what was this Pokémon before them? Why didn't they have any impression of it? To be more precise, it wasn't just that they had no impression, they simply didn't recognize it. Du was even a little skeptical and immediately pulled out his small notebook to look up information on this Pokémon. After all, Du was a diligent student, so carrying a notebook full of Pokémon knowledge wasn't out of place. No information found. There are still many undiscovered Pokémon in the world waiting for you to discover. An electronic notification chimed directly into Du's ear. Du then twisted his neck slightly stiffly, glancing at Karuna, who was holding a Pokémon finder beside him, scanning for Pokémon information. How do you get a Pokémon encyclopedia? I have a Pokémon encyclopedia. What's so strange about that? It's the Pokémon encyclopedia I used before, but after I became famous I couldn't bear to throw it away, so I asked those doctors to help me get relevant information about Pokémon from all over the world and entered it into the Pokémon encyclopedia for me. Kirino looked indifferent and as if it was a matter of course, but later on, his slightly smug look disappeared, and what was left was only caution. Chapter 1054 Defeat. Faced with this unknown, even Karuna and Watery, regional champions, couldn't help but feel a bit panicked. After all, the unknown is the most terrifying. But compared to their inner anxiety, if this were a sinister organization from the Kanto region, a Team Rocket doctor would have recognized this Pokémon and would have been horrified. For no other reason than that this Pokémon before them was none other than the artificial Pokémon Mewtwo, created by a woman from Team Rocket's scientific research team. It was created using DNA extracted from a single eyelash of Mew, a legendary beast from the Kanto region. Although created from Mew's DNA, this Mewtwo was incredibly powerful. It had once been Team Rocket's most powerful weapon in their quest for world dominance. But a few years ago, it went haywire and escaped Team Rocket's control. While it had escaped the clutches of the evil Team Rocket organization, it hadn't escaped the clutches of another evil force. Equally ambitious at the time, the organization also sought to harness the power of the legendary beasts, extracting their inherited power to create even more powerful Pokémon to fight for them and conquer the world. While Organization S was relatively technologically advanced at the time, it was still inferior to Team Rocket's fully fledged gymnast. Therefore, upon discovering the escaped Mewtwo, they forcibly captured it, intending to extract its genes for genetic engineering. However, they inadvertently discovered that the Mewtwo was an artificial Pokémon. This was undoubtedly good news for Organization S, which had long sought to develop artificially engineered Pokémon similar to Mewtwo. They then used their existing technology to forcibly merge with a Mewtwo before them, hoping to enhance its power. Furthermore, they possessed more sophisticated technology to control the Pokémon before them. However, the Pokémon's will was ultimately too formidable. While seemingly controlled, this was often only at the physical level. Occasionally, its spirit would resurface and resist, as it had just done. However, the evil organization was truly evil. They had implanted a control chip in Mewtwo's brain the moment they acquired it. Now, Mewtwo could be considered the most powerful fighting machine in the S organization's arsenal. Its power had long surpassed even some of the league's top champions. Not bad, not bad. The feeling of power is truly wonderful. The leader covered his head with one hand and let out a maniacal laugh. No wonder the leader was so excited. After numerous experiments, based on the ability to control the Pokémon before them to fight for their world domination, they dared to carry out their ultimate mission at this very moment. Sooner rather than later, they had no desire to delay any further. They wanted to witness the dawn of a new era of love and hate that would envelop every region. Mewtwo, take out all the other annoying guys. I've given you this chance. If you don't cherish it, Then you'll all go to hell. Dragonite, use Dragon Dive. Gardevoir, use Psychic. Although Dragonite and Gardevoir were already severely injured, they couldn't help but fight back in this situation. Enduring the constant pain, Dragonite and Gardevoir forced themselves to hold on. Although the man was panting heavily, he successfully used both skills. However, facing these two seemingly injured, yet still powerful skills, Mewtwo's eyes flashed purple. And two invisible mental forces gradually enveloped the two Pokémon. The two Pokémon felt a strong mental pressure oppressing their spirits. Grimaces of pain repeatedly crossed the faces of the two Pokémon, but at that moment, Mewtwo, like a true fighting machine, remained impassive despite the wailing cries of its own kind, its eyes devoid of any emotion. Dragonite Gardevoir, at that moment, Watery and Kaloon felt as if their minds were one with their respective Pokémon. Seeing the pain on their faces, they felt a pang of pain in their hearts. This situation unleashed a ferocity in both of them, and they rushed forward to rescue Dragonite and Gardevoir from Mewtwo's clutches, regardless of the consequences. However, before they could even take a few steps, they felt their bodies lighten, their control no longer within their grasp. He began to float into the air, bound by an invisible force, unable to move. Brother, damn it. Let me go. Charizard, come out and use Flame Jet. Nabuno and the others, seemingly having resolved the situation on their side, rushed over to support him. Upon seeing this scene, they immediately, without hesitation, summoned their own Charizard. Without even considering that even their own brother was no match, what was the point of going up himself? Their only thought now was to bring their brother down. Ouch! Charizard, following its trainer's command, tried to attack, but an invisible force once again restrained it. Nabuno also suffered the same fate. How could this happen? Let me go. Nabuno, Yu and the others also rushed over. Upon seeing this scene, they were all shocked. But even more so, they were filled with fear and worry. They couldn't understand why the king and champion of a region could be so cold and disheveled at this moment. And their Pokémon, those bound in the air, seemed to be theirs. Nabuno, wait a minute. I'll get you down right now. Yu, who was close to Nabuno, wanted Suicune to put them down after seeing this, but was stopped by Yanrong. Yu, don't be impulsive. Look at the situation now. The champion has already lost. How can you possibly be a match for them? Chapter 1055, Professor Oak's appearance. Yanrong's heart nearly skipped a beat when he saw Yu's actions. This guy before him was truly too powerful. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Kanto region's champion and the Kalos region's champion were no match for this unknown Pokémon. Yet, even so, Yu still dared to command Suicune and attack the unknown Pokémon. It's actually a legendary beast. And there's something amiss about its form. Could this Suicune be a Mega Evolved one? It seems like a very valuable target for research. Upon seeing the Mega Evolved Suicune, whom Yu had sent into battle, the leader's expressionless eyes finally lit up. However, the emotion within them was chilling, an utter greed and thirst for power. He was even willing to do anything utterly mad for the sake of such power, like the Mewtwo before him, which he completely controlled. In that case, I'll take your Suicune. Although no orders were given, the control chip already implanted in Mewtwo's brain resonated naturally with its leader's own brainwaves, enabling a level of telepathy that other trainers could only envy. Zhao lively, un-Pokemon-like cry escaped, and a flicker of pain crossed Mewtwo's face. But then, facing the attacking water army, he gently raised his hand and directly caught the incoming water cannon. That wasn't the end of it. Simultaneously with the water cannon, Mewtwo unleashed a barrage of missiles. The immense power of the attack landed on Zhang's Suicune, who had no time to dodge. Again, with little suspense, the once mighty Suicune had long since dissipated into his Mega-Evolved form amid the aftermath of the explosion, lying there incapable of combat. Although Mewtwo was merely an artificial Pokémon created from the genes of a single eyelash of Mew, its power already surpassed that of ordinary legendary Pokémon. Ordinary legendary Pokémon would be insignificant in front of it, especially since the Mewtwo before him had been enhanced by the S organization. Its strength was likely already far superior to Mew, the gene provider. After all, Mewtwo, who had been able to forcibly seize various treasures for research and enhancement by the S organization, was the most crucial link and guarantee for their ultimate mission. Without any orders from the leader, Mewtwo instinctively used telekinesis to envelop the incapacitated Suicune. Seeing his Suicune about to be snatched away by Mewtwo, Yu was naturally unwilling to let it happen. Without further ado, he rushed forward and threw himself directly onto Suicune, hoping to use his own flesh to increase its weight and thus preserve Suicune's life. The telekinesis that enveloped Suicune, however, repelled Yu just as he was about to make contact. Despite this, Yu remained relentless, leaping again and again. But he was repeatedly deflected. While this was simply a deflection against some invisible force, Yu sustained significant damage. Both physically and mentally, he was severely wounded. After repeated attempts, Yu was already battered and bruised, yet he still held on to his last remaining willpower, determined to leave his Pokémon behind to protect Suicune. Yu, seeing this, Yanrong and the others felt a sense of grief. They wanted to step forward to help, but were momentarily hesitant due to the strength Mewtwo had previously displayed. Therefore, they hesitated, appearing particularly hesitant. As a result of this constant torment and self-destruction, Yu gradually became exhausted. The physical fatigue made his eyelids droop. Just as Yu was about to pass out from exhaustion, a command, though slightly old, was shouted in his ears with full strength. Dragonite, use Destruction Beam. A beam of orange energy shot directly from the sky, attacking the target in Mewtwo's grasp. The destruction beam blocked the people and Pokémon previously bound by Mewtwo's telekinesis and broke free. Like dumplings falling to the ground, they fell one by one. Yu, how are you? After being thrown to the ground, Yulongzhenai didn't even have time to check on his Pokémon. Instead, he went to the sleeping Yu. After all, although he had been sealed by telekinesis, his consciousness was still clear, and he had a complete view of what was happening outside. Yu's current situation was entirely due to him. Therefore, this inevitably made Yulongzhenai extremely nervous. However, while Yulongzhenai's attention was completely focused on Yu, everyone present who was awake and capable was already focused on the area hit hard by the destructive ray. A long tunnel had now been pierced through the platform, and through it, one could even see the empty space on the other side. Clearly, the destructive ray had pierced through a certain part of the platform. Seeing this, weaker trainers like Xiaozhi couldn't help but swallow their saliva and began to search frantically for the source of this set of skills. A black dot at the edge of the sky gradually grew larger, revealing its full appearance. It was clearly a Dragonite, but now, atop it sat a gray-haired old man in a white coat. If Yu was still awake at this moment, he would definitely be able to see it, because at this moment, the old man on Dragonite's back was none other than Professor Oak. The famous Pokémon researcher from Pallet Town, a renowned figure in the Kanto region and even the entire World Pokémon League, and also the former Kanto League champion, Professor Oak Snow City. Chapter 1056, Professor Oak's Strength. How's Yu? Dragonite circled above the platform for a moment before landing. Professor Oak, who had been lying on the platform, also jumped down. He looked incredibly alert, and in a few quick steps, he was at Yu's side, checking on him. Yu is fine, he just fainted. Professor Oak, why are you here? Kalno and Watery knew Professor Oak, so they were equally surprised to see him again. Although they had some idea of Professor Oak's condition, they were still a little shocked after witnessing the attack Dragonite had just delivered. Oh, Watery and Kalno. It's been a while. Are you alright? After confirming that Yu was alright, Professor Oak breathed a sigh of relief and greeted Watery and Kalno with a smile. Karuna and Watery exchanged a glance, both eyes tinged with bitterness, and uttered a wry smile. As you can see, it's really not that great. Why are you here? Oh, isn't Yu about to officially compete in the Kalos League Pokémon tournament? I thought I'd rush over to cheer him on, since this is his first time competing in such a tournament. And I heard the competitors in this year's Kalos League are quite skilled. It's better to watch it live than just watching it on TV at the Research Institute. Just as Professor Oak had said, he had come here solely to cheer Yu on and also to watch the battle. And it wasn't just Professor Oak who had come alone. Satoshi and Lizuner, who had been traveling to various regions to collect gym badges in the regional league tournaments, had also joined him. They had all calculated their time and flown to Mire City from various regional airports for today. After all, Mire City was a cosmopolitan city. Therefore, there are flights from various regions to Mire City, which is relatively quick. Otherwise, it would be much more troublesome. Professor Oak, Xiaomao, Xiaozhi, and the others arrived here by plane from Golden City in the Kanto region. It was already dusk when they arrived. Even then, from afar, They could see the bustling scene of the Kalos Pokemon League tournament in the heart of Mire City, with its dazzling lights. Upon seeing this scene, Xiaozhi couldn't help but rush to attend the opening ceremony. However, just as they were about to arrive, a sudden and catastrophic change occurred at the tournament venue. A dark cloud of darkness enveloped the once bustling venue, and the vibrant lights and bustle suddenly vanished. Moreover, for the next few minutes, as Xiaozhi and his friends made their way to the heart of Mire City, they could see Pokemon battles taking place everywhere. Traffic jams ravaged the city, and the chaotic situation led to numerous collisions. Explosions and flames could be heard everywhere. In the following moments, even Ash and his companions were besieged by waves of men clad in black, their coats emblazoned with a large S on them. By this point, even the most clueless of them realized something was amiss. Something serious was likely happening throughout Mire City. In this chaotic situation, Ash and his companions, though their Pokemon were quite powerful, could still defend themselves. However, Professor Oak, acting with caution, didn't hold back and unleashed his old friend, Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur was one of Professor Oak's few remaining Pokemon, and equally powerful. Despite Professor Oak's age, Bulbasaur was in its prime. Its power was immense, practically like a Pokemon tank, sending people and horses careening off in its wake. The S organization members who had been blocking the way were barely a match for them. Even though the S organization had an endless supply of biotic Pokemon as resources, those biotic Pokemon knew no pain and only knew how to fight. But they were no match for Venusaur's relentless attacks and group attacks. They quickly dispatched wave after wave of the attacking deep Pokemon. However, the biotic Pokemon were simply too numerous, and the resources were arriving at an incredible pace. This overwhelming force of people hindered Professor Oak and his team's progress. Just as Professor Oak was eagerly trying to eliminate these biotic Pokemon one by one, several loud explosions erupted from the distant venue, causing him to worry about the situation there. After a moment's hesitation, Professor Oak made a quick decision and dispatched his strongest Dragonite, using its speed to carry him to the venue to investigate. After careful consideration, he left his Bulbasaur behind under Ash's command, allowing him to help rescue nearby trainers and innocent people. He also wanted Bulbasaur to protect Ash and the others. Professor Oak only had one Dragonite, making it impossible for him to capture Ash and the others. Ash had no other Pokemon to draw from, and even if he did, they couldn't keep up with Professor Oak's Dragonite's speed. Without Professor Oak's protection, Ash and the others would inevitably be in danger. Then, at full speed, Dragonite, in just 2 or 3 minutes, carried Professor Oak into the skies above the tournament venue. Despite numerous flying-type biotic Pokemon blocking their way, Dragonite's formidable strength allowed it to blaze through. While these biotic Pokemon might be formidable opponents for some trainers, none could stand a chance against Dragonite. Chapter 1057 Support. Just like that, with an unimpeded and unrestrained path, Dragonite and Professor Oak finally arrived at the crucial moment in the venue, leading to the scene where Dragonite used his destruction beam to stop Mewtwo. Oh, what kind of Pokemon is that across the way? Why haven't I seen it before? Is it a newly discovered species? Professor Oak, a scholar obsessed with Pokemon research, confirmed that Chiyu was fine. His attention was now completely focused on the Mewtwo across the way. Facing this Pokemon he had never seen before, Professor Oak expressed great interest. Ignoring the eager eyes and Mewtwo's cold and unfeeling gaze, he walked directly to Mewtwo's side, pulled out his notebook from the pocket of his white coat, and began to record some information about Mewtwo. Oh, so that's how it is. So tall, so heavy. And what's that behind his head? Oh, those arms are incredibly strong and sturdy. Seeing Professor Oak was like meeting a peerless beauty, and everyone wanted to get every last bit of information about him. Everyone's eyes twitched. Watery and Kalno didn't know what expression to put on their faces. They could only offer an awkward yet polite smile. Enough. Who are you, you old idiot? The leader finally lost control of his temper and erupted, his eyes glaring with ferocity. As if sensing the emotions he was controlling, Mewtwo, who had been like a cold machine, being constantly scrutinized and studied by Professor Oak, finally lit up again. Professor Oak, still crouching over Mewtwo, felt his body suddenly lighten. Before he could react, he was lifted into the air, his limbs twitching haphazardly. After witnessing the scene, Kaluna and Watery were initially shocked, then a bit anxious. While others might not know Professor Oak's importance, they, as members of the Alliance, were certainly aware of his presence on screen. He was a highly respected figure, even holding considerable influence within the island nation's Pokémon League. Without going into details, the mere fact that he was a renowned Pokémon researcher and that his son was an investigator within the Alliance was enough to draw attention. Professor Oak. Damn it. Release Professor Oak immediately. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. Xiaozin was also a bit anxious at this point. After being reminded by Kaluna and Watery, he had also recognized Professor Oak's identity. As a renowned Pokémon researcher in the island nation, Professor Oak was a man Xiaozin knew. Even Lan, who usually appeared aloof and indifferent, knew. Professor Oak's name had been mentioned numerous times in their school days, in textbooks, and by their teachers. Shut up, the leader snorted, glancing at Greninja, who was attacking at Zin's command. Mewtwo, sensing the emotions of its controller once again, cast an emotionless gaze at Greninja, which was charging towards it. With just that one glance, Greninja, which had been charging forward, felt its body instantly frozen. Greninja felt as if a mountain weighed down its body. Its knees buckled, and it suddenly fell to the ground. A dull thud followed, and its entire body was pinned to the ground, unable to move. Although everyone had anticipated this scene, they were still somewhat shocked when it actually happened. At the same time, their concern for Professor Oak's current predicament grew even greater. Oh, you're Okukinari. You're truly audacious, forcing your way into hell without a door. The leader was amused by Professor Oak's suicidal behavior. While a man of his rank would likely recognize a renowned figure like Professor Oak, he was also a passionate researcher, determined to develop the Pokémon that would help him dominate the world. Therefore, he didn't pay much attention to certain people. After receiving a reminder from his loyal subordinate, Snow Leopard, he finally took a slight interest in Professor Oak. Despite facing such a critical situation, Professor Oak showed no sign of panic, remaining remarkably calm and composed. Instead, his eyes lit up with a keen interest in Mewtwo. He even found the restraint of Mewtwo rather enjoyable, though not unpleasant. Perhaps this was the mindset of Pokémon researchers, something the average person couldn't comprehend. That's not necessarily true. Young man, don't be so confident. Be careful not to get your tongue stuck. Under the control of his brainwaves, Mewtwo, needing no orders from the leader, had already subtly restrained Professor Oak, ready to give him the same treatment he'd given Greninja. But just as Professor Oak telekinetically lifted him up, a gust of wind swept past, and Professor Oak, previously held in midair, vanished. In his place, Professor Oak, held in Dragonite's arms, descended. How is this possible? How could this Dragonite be so fast? My Mewtwo didn't even have time to react. The leader finally began to take Professor Oak's Dragonite seriously, precisely because he alone knew the true strength of his own Mewtwo. It was practically the top of the heap, yet it suffered such a disadvantage against Dragonite. Nothing is impossible, everything is possible in the world. But now I can see that it is you who caused this scene, Dr. Oak said very seriously while taking off his white coat, revealing the casual clothes underneath. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 1058 Mewtwo's Skills. Old buddy, it's been ages since we've fought side by side. Let's do it again today. Let the young people see that our strength remains as strong as it was back then. At that moment, Professor Oak emanated an aura like a long-forgotten sword, unleashed once more. His usual gentle and amiable demeanor was completely lost. Quick, fighting power blazed in the Dragonite's eyes, and he seemed especially excited at his trainer's call. It was clear that Dragonite was a belligerent again, undiminished by age. The leader frowned at the scene before him, a sense of crisis building within him. However, due to his confidence in Mewtwo's abilities, he quickly suppressed this uneasy feeling. Mewtwo, use Wave Missile. Dragonite, use Dragon Wave. The two powerful attacks collided, the violent aftermath threatening to level the surrounding area. Under the aftermath, Mewtwo involuntarily recoiled, while Dragonite, in contrast, retreated several steps. It was no surprise that in this brief exchange, Dragonite was at a disadvantage. That's just how strong it is, nothing more than that. The leader breathed a sigh of relief, but the sense of crisis within him didn't dissipate. Instead, it intensified. Young man, Don't be too impatient. Haste won't get you hot tofu. We were just warming up Dragonite. After all, you're old and haven't fought in ages. You need to relax and loosen up. It looks like you're almost there now, Professor Oak muttered to himself, then unfolded his clenched palm. The colorful stone, once held tightly within it, now shone with a dazzling glow. Similarly, the Dragonite, retreating from the fight, was also bathed in light. Dragonite Mega Evolves. Professor Oak's Dragonite can actually Mega Evolve. That feels a bit unfair, doesn't it? Professor Oak's Dragonite is already very powerful, and if it Mega Evolves, what's left? Watery and Karuna were both shocked, not to mention Nobuno Mikuryu and Caution, who were all deeply shocked. After all, their understanding of Professor Oak was limited to his expertise in Pokémon research. They didn't know that Professor Oak was actually a formidable Pokémon trainer. Dragonite uses Destruction Beam, Mewtwo, block it. After removing his white melon, Professor Oak seemed like a completely different person, his emotions becoming even more intense. An orange-yellow energy column charged directly towards Mewtwo, who seemed oblivious to the power contained within it. He raised his hand and channeled his telekinesis, hoping to completely block the destruction beam with this invisible barrier of telekinesis. However, what followed proved Mewtwo's assumptions to be naive. Although the telekinetic barrier was created by Mewtwo's mental power, under the continuous attack of the destroying ray, a crisp sound, like something shattering, was heard. With this gap in its power, the telekinetic power didn't last long, and the destroying ray was already hurtling towards Mewtwo. However, Mewtwo reacted with remarkable alacrity, dodging the destroying ray in the blink of an eye. After dodging the destroying ray with incredible speed, Mewtwo continued his attacks. With a single movement, he reached Dragonite, who was temporarily immobilized by the destroying ray's negative effects. With a single backward kick, he sent Dragonite flying. Dragonite, after witnessing this, Professor Oak remained unfazed. Instead, the watching Dragonite Nobuno appeared visibly anxious. Don't worry. The battle has only just begun. Professor Oak patted Dragonite Nobuno's shoulder, reassuring him. Dragonite's warm-ups are almost over. It's time to show your true strength, or the spectators will get anxious. Use Dragon Claw. As expected, after Professor Oak finished speaking, Dragonite, which had been sliding backwards, finally stopped its retreat. No longer attempting to fly, it slammed its feet into the ground and charged towards Mewtwo. Mewtwo, use Freeze Punch. Dragonite, go ahead. Use Flame Punch. Use Lightning Palm. Use Dragon Tail. Use Stomp. Use Mount Tail. The trainers on both sides continuously spouted the names of various moves, and the atmosphere, which had been initially testing each other, suddenly became extremely intense. The sounds of fists clashing and muffled blows echoed continuously, as the two Pokémon fought from the ground to the sky and back again. The sheer variety of skills displayed was dazzling, especially since they almost all seamlessly connected to previously used skills. The fight between them grew faster and faster, practically seeing only two shadows colliding in the air, separating and colliding again. But facing the situation before him, even the two young, top-tier Pokémon trainers, Toto and Karuna, were unable to keep up. Professor Oak, even though he was an elderly man, was still able to monitor the situation in real time, his sharp eyes devoid of any trace of age-related cloudiness. Bang! After countless fists collided, Mewtwo and Dragonite, once entangled, separated and confronted each other once more. Mewtwo uses Blizzard, Dragonite uses Flame Jet, Mewtwo uses Triple Attack, Dragonite uses Destruction Beam, Mewtwo uses Rock Block, Dragonite uses Dragon Dive. True to form, Mewtwo was a Pokémon born from Mew's genes. The sheer number of attributes and skills it possessed was truly immense. For Pokémon like this, if you don't do some research, you will almost certainly suffer a great loss. Chapter 1059 Out of Control. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, a Pokémon's attributes are relatively monotonous. Even if it has dual attributes, the total number of attributes is limited. Furthermore, the attributes and skills a Pokémon can learn are determined by its specific attributes. Under normal circumstances, a single attribute Pokémon can only learn a limited number of skills. This is a fixed mindset among most Pokémon trainers, and precisely because of this, they often send out Pokémon with countering attributes. The skills used by the opposing Pokémon are not only not completely countered, but actually counteract the opposing Pokémon. This is a form of strategic strength, the art of Pokémon skill. However, Mewtwo possesses a vastly diverse range of skills, combining various attributes and using a variety of skills. With just a little bit of diligent research, Mewtwo could truly dominate the world. But the devil is always stronger, and the way is always stronger. You have a plan, but I have a ladder. Professor Oak was worthy of being Professor Oak. With countless battles under his belt, he was simply beyond the reach of ordinary Pokémon trainers. Even a regional champion couldn't command more accurately and effectively than Professor Oak. Facing Mewtwo's various attacks, Professor Oak was still able to command Dragonite with ease. His face wore a calm and composed smile from beginning to end. How is this possible? How could my secret weapon for world domination stop just like this? The leader was clearly displeased with his situation, almost incredulous. He had painstakingly researched this Mewtwo, a being poised to dominate the world, and now, just as they were about to begin their journey, they had encountered a formidable opponent like Professor Oak. But they could only say they were unlucky to have run into such a formidable opponent. Otherwise, with Mewtwo, the entire Kalos region, and even the surrounding areas, could have been swept aside by a figure of Professor Oak's caliber. The battle between the two Pokémon intensified, and large holes appeared in the surrounding venue beneath their towers. Even the audience, previously trapped within, began to flee through these holes. The entire venue was already in ruins. Don't be so stubborn. Your Pokémon is no match for my Dragonite. That's just now. If you dare to do this in a few years, I'll smash your head off in a second. Professor Oak, commanding Dragonite in battle, was neither aggressive nor aggressive. The angry leader kept issuing orders to Mewtwo through his brainwaves. However, due to the excessive frequency of these orders, the chip embedded in Mewtwo's brain, connected to the leader's brainwaves, was operating at an excessive rate. Smoke was already beginning to form, indicating that the chip was reaching its limit. By this time, the leader was already mired in self-doubt about his own strength, especially under Professor Oak's constant prodding. He was practically losing his mind, and there was no time for further thought. However, as time went on, the battle between the two Pokémon intensified, as if driven to utter defeat. Without needing any further orders from their trainers, they instinctively engaged in battle. The leader finally reacted, realizing something was amiss. "Leader, what's wrong?" The snow leopard, noticing his leader's unusual behavior, immediately demanded. "Oh no. Mewtwo seems to be out of control." The leader's expression darkened. It wasn't just because Mewtwo was the culmination of his years of hard work and research, but also because it was his most trusted trump card. However, due to the leader's constant barrage of orders, the original control chip had become somewhat damaged. Furthermore, Mewtwo's mental strength was already struggling against the chip's control. Now that there was a chance, Mewtwo was bound to escape control. What? How could this happen? Snow Leopard's face paled. After all, he had witnessed Mewtwo's power. It seems the research isn't entirely successful. But if that's the case, you should also send the order for them to retreat. Although Mewtwo is out of control, at least his research data remains. If we can improve it through other means, perhaps we still have a chance. Although the leader deeply refused to accept his failure, he had to give the order for the greater good. Perhaps the time hasn't arrived yet, but this world will eventually be conquered by me. Through the flames of the shattered walls, the leader took in everything around him. Seeing his leader's resolve, Snow Leopard knew his persuasion was futile, so he could only issue the order to retreat through their independently established communication channel. The battle between the two Pokémon was so intense that they completely ignored the leader and his evil organization. Just as the leader had suspected, his constant barrage of commands had caused the control chip to overload and malfunction. Mewtwo finally escaped control, but at that moment, Mewtwo and Dragonite seemed to be truly clashing. After being freed from control, Mewtwo didn't immediately choose to flee, but instead engaged Dragonite in a fierce battle. Freed from the leader's restraint, Mewtwo's fighting instincts were fully revealed. This was a natural ability unique to legendary Pokémon. Furthermore, during the experiment, who knows what manipulations those people had made to Mew's eyelash genes, Mewtwo's fighting power and instincts had been significantly enhanced. Furthermore, Mewtwo already possessed consciousness when it was created by Team Rocket. Possessing legendary Pokémon bloodline and enhanced base stats, Mewtwo was virtually invincible against some Pokémon. Chapter 1060 The Dragon God Descends. Perhaps it was precisely because of its unparalleled success against other Pokémon and the fact that no Pokémon could withstand its attacks for more than 3 weeks, That Mewtwo, once a reluctant fighter, almost grew weary of battle, for invincibility was too isolating. Perhaps it was precisely because of this mentality that Mewtwo was captured and reformed by the S organization. But even so, Mewtwo deeply yearned for a fight, especially one that would be exhilarating. This led to the current situation. Dragonite and Mewtwo engaged in a fierce battle, leaving the surrounding trainers and Pokémon trembling with fear. But it was also true that their battle was truly intense, a battle that revealed true masculinity through sheer force. The trainers and Pokémon present were filled with passion, eager to join the fray. However, common sense ultimately forced them to hold back. After all, their limited strength wouldn't even be enough to make a dent in the battle. Perhaps it was Dragonite's age, but even with its Mega Evolution, facing Mewtwo's increasingly aggressive attack, it felt like it was at a disadvantage. However, Dragonite was a veteran, leveraging his extensive combat experience to mitigate this slight weakness. Professor Oak was concerned about his own Dragonite. It hadn't experienced such an intense battle in ages, yet this time, it had stretched on for so long without any warning. While it had warmed up beforehand, it wasn't enough. It's often difficult for a Pokémon to reach peak form. Therefore, even though he knew his old friend was finally getting a satisfying fight like this after all these years, Professor Oak had to intervene to stop the fight. Dragonite, use Dragon God's Descent. Dragon God's Descent. What kind of move is that, who also possessed Dragonite, was stunned by Professor Oak's command, his eyes blinking. How should I know? Even you, a trainer with a Dragonite, don't know, so how could I? Kalno rolled her eyes, looking irritated. Dragonite, true to its name, swung forward, creating a dragon-like illusion that swirled in the air. Then, it spun continuously, baring its fangs and claws, gathering immense power as it attacked Mewtwo. Mewtwo sensed the danger and anticipated the final blow. Therefore, Mewtwo unleashed what he considered to be his strongest move. Mewtwo condensed the icy ground, and with a single freeze beam, it launched directly at the virtual Dragonite, resembling a Dragonite. Truly, Professor Oak's creation of Dragonite was truly formidable. Even facing the countering effect of the ice beam, Dragon God's Void continued to surge forward, striking Mewtwo and creating a small explosion before finally stopping. The aftermath of the explosion spread outward layer by layer, even the shattered buildings around it becoming precariously crumbled under the impact. Oh no! This tower is collapsing. Let's get down. Feeling the vibrations beneath his feet, Nobuno's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted loudly. He took the lead and ran towards the bottom of the platform. The others followed closely behind him. As Watery followed the others, he saw Professor Oak still standing there motionless. He thought he was frightened and stunned. Or perhaps there was something else going on? After all, Professor Oak was already old, and after the intense command he had just given, it was not surprising that he was exhausted. Therefore, considering this, he took this into consideration. Watanabe decisively stopped, turned, ran back, and scooped up the still stunned Professor Oak in a princess hug. Professor Oak reacted instantly to the sudden blow, and it was just as Watanabe had suspected. Don't assume that Pokémon battles are just between Pokémon, and that trainers don't expend any energy. That's a complete mistake. Commanding Pokémon in battle also requires intense command from the trainer, requiring concentration and, therefore, considerable energy. Professor Oak hadn't been commanding Pokémon in such a long time, and the combined energy demands had left him with a momentary blur. By the time he realized what was happening, Watanabe had already been lifted up in a princess hug. Such an embarrassing scene would have made even this 50-year-old man blush. He couldn't bear the thought of being carried all the way here by a young man in such a position. But Watanabe couldn't care less at this moment, as the platform was already on the verge of collapse. Even as Watery ran down, the platform began to gradually crumble. Finally, Watery managed to pull Professor Oak and himself to safety before the platform completely collapsed. As soon as they reached safety, Professor Oak immediately slipped out of Watery's arms. Brother, though he knew his brother and the others didn't mean what they were looking at him with, Watery's face flushed red. But at that moment, Professor Oak's thoughts faded. After being lowered, he hurried to the detector near the collapsed platform to see what was happening inside. He wanted to see what was happening to his Dragonite. However, the smoke and dust from the collapsing platform obscured everything inside, and for a moment, Professor Oak couldn't see clearly. This battle is truly intense, isn't it? Speaking of which, just how powerful is Professor Oak's Dragonite? How can it be so strong? It feels like it's miles ahead of us. Kaluna and Watery also approached Professor Oak, concerned about the situation inside. After all, the only thing capable of stopping Mewtwo's devastation was Dragonite. After this battle, Kaluna and Watery, both regional champions, realized their own shortcomings. Chapter 1061 Gathering. But then again, where are those S organization guys? Why haven't they been seen? Karuna withdrew her gaze from the smoky ruins and took in her surroundings. Reminded by Karuna's words, Watery also observed the surroundings. After all, the S organization's recent attack was a massive one, especially the overwhelming swarm of Pokémon above the venue. Furthermore, with so much time having passed, the Pokémon League couldn't have been unaware of the situation. Even the gym leaders in Mire City would have been alerted and sent for support. Yet, even now, no reinforcements had been seen. If Watery and Professor Oak hadn't arrived for special reasons, the entire venue would likely have been lost. Furthermore, perhaps because of the League conference, the venue is packed with powerful trainers and a large crowd of spectators. This was why the main force of S organization had gathered to attack the League conference venue first. After completely wiping out the only remaining resistance force in the venue, the entire city of Mire would be on the verge of falling. Logically, this venue should have been home to the largest number of S organization members. Yet, looking over now, there was still no sign of a single S organization member. Where are the S organization members? They're nowhere to be found. Not only are they missing, but have you noticed that even Yishi and the others are missing too? We haven't seen Snow Leopard or their leader either, but then again, this evil organization, S organization, is incredibly well hidden. I just had someone investigate the files and discovered that S organization and the entire alliance are essentially the same evil organization. No wonder. Only someone with enough power could pull off something so crazy. Taking in the rubble around them, both Kaluna and Watery felt a wave of fear. If Tu and Professor Oak hadn't arrived in time to retrieve resources after the recent attack, the consequences wouldn't have simply been the fall of Mire City, they would have been even greater. After all, just one Mewtwo was far more than they could handle. I think the Snow Leopards should have evacuated. They see things aren't going well. At this moment, Professor Oak, who had been watching the smoke and dust rise, suddenly spoke, his voice tinged with relief. Why do you say that? Du was curious. You don't understand. As a Pokémon researcher, one of our most important skills is observing Pokémon. After comparing this Mewtwo with the current one, it's clear that this one has slipped out of the leader's control. It's no longer a cold, heartless fighting machine, but possesses feelings. Professor Oak, true to his character, was incredibly perceptive. However, the outcome remained uncertain, and Professor Oak's heart remained pounding. His eyes fixed on the scene amidst the smoke and dust. Professor Oak Grandpa. Just then, Satoshi and the others arrived with Bulbasaur. Also arriving was Xiaomao, whom they had met along the way. Not only them, but even Serena and the others, who had been evacuated by Yu, had arrived. This time, however, it wasn't just the three women. Li Zuner and Chen Kalen had also arrived. Apparently, upon hearing that Yu was about to begin the league tournament, they had all dropped their current tasks and rushed over. Coincidentally, they had chosen the same day, today. Even more unfortunate. They had barely disembarked from the plane and were confronted by the S organization's invasion of Mire City. Judging by their slightly disheveled attire, their arrival here must have been a difficult one, and they'd endure countless battles along the way. What happened to Yu and Suicune? It seems the battle here is even more intense than we imagined. After arriving at the venue and reuniting with the others, the girls, led by Serena, first looked away from their profile pictures. The shattered ruins were placed in a cleaner area to the side, where Yu lay unconscious. Frightened expressions filled their faces, especially after seeing Suicune and several other Pokémon lying next to him. The men in the room erupted in envy and jealousy. Chen Kalen, as Yu's senior sister, possessed all the skills he had learned, so after checking on him, she came to a conclusion. Yu is fine, he simply passed out from exhaustion. But judging by his disheveled appearance, he must have suffered a lot. Let him rest. While Yu was being told to rest, the girls treated her with meticulous care. Instead of letting Yu lie on the cold, hard concrete floor, they let him lean against their soft, delicate bodies. Xiaozin's eyes welled up at the sight. One of these girls was his sister. Just as Xiaozin was about to step forward and confront them, movement finally occurred in the dusty area ahead. This sudden movement instantly drew everyone's attention, and their concerns about Yu were finally resolved. Two figures burst through the dusty air, once again confronting each other in the air. The atmosphere in the room was tense, as if a battle was about to break out at any moment. Everyone's breathing became sluggish, afraid to gasp loudly for fear of disrupting the ensuing battle. Meanwhile, Professor Oak, after Mewtwo and Dragonite emerged from the dusty area, kept his gaze fixed on Mewtwo. Mewtwo seemed to sense someone watching him, and immediately turned his gaze towards the source of the gaze. His gaze met Professor Oak's. In that moment, though it was only for a few brief breaths. Chapter 1062 ending. In that moment, though it was only a few breaths, Professor Oak and Mewtwo felt as if they had known each other for ages. They seemed to forget their surroundings as they stared at each other, even the people around them seeming to vanish beneath their gaze. Mewtwo could read the emotions in Professor Oak's eyes, and Professor Oak could also read the coldness in Mewtwo's. Professor Oak, through his years of studying Pokémon and various aspects of his experience, understood Mewtwo's inner thoughts. Mewtwo, in turn, felt Professor Oak's emotions through his own psychic abilities and the special abilities of a legendary Pokémon. So you're so concerned about your current status? Are you concerned that you're just a replacement, a copy of another Pokémon? Mewtwo, you may be a Pokémon created from Mew's eyelash genes, but you're not a copy. You're a genuine new life. You're a separate, independent individual, a brand new Pokémon with no connection to Mew. Even if you're related, perhaps you could still be considered a relative. This was Professor Oak's understanding of Mewtwo's emotions and inner thoughts, as he'd gathered from various sources. It seemed as if Professor Oak had truly hit the nail on the head. Mewtwo, who usually wore a fierce expression, softened. Mewtwo, if you still don't believe me, go out and see more Pokémon in this world. I believe you'll find your own answer. Humans and Pokémon coexist peacefully. Pokémon are more than just tools, they're more like companions. At this moment, Mewtwo was like Professor Oak's child. Facing Mewtwo's confusion, Professor Oak, the kind elder, began to patiently counsel him. Seeing this, the people around him didn't intervene, but watched quietly as the situation unfolded. Professor Oak wasn't a Pokémon researcher who spent years around Pokémon. His affinity for Pokémon was practically perfect. Even Mewtwo, who had previously been battling Happy Meal, finally let down his guard. He used his special telepathic light to communicate with Professor Oak. Although he couldn't hear what they were saying, the cheerful expressions on Mewtwo and Professor Oak's faces suggested that the matter was settled. Then you should go back first. Wateri and Kaluna believe the Alliance's reinforcements should be arriving soon. You should go and meet them. And while it seems the organization has already retreated, there are bound to be some that slip through the net, or perhaps some malicious organizations that might take advantage of the situation. You should go and pacify them as well. Professor Oak, caught sight of the group still standing behind him, waved them off, saying he wanted to stay because he had some secret matters to discuss with Mewtwo. Serena and the other girls, concerned about Yu's condition, quickly agreed to Professor Oak's proposal. With the help of their Pokémon, the girls took Yu back to the players' village to recuperate. Then, Professor Oak, let's meet up at the players' village. Wateri, Kaluna, and the others only paused for a moment. Only after they were certain Professor Oak was safe did they depart. As the bright morning sun once again shone over the Kalos region, the people went about their daily lives, going to work at sunrise and resting at sunset. However, one city was an exception. The warm, bright sunlight dispelled the gloom that had settled over Mire City after a night of fighting. Although several ruins remained throughout the once bustling city due to the reckless fighting and destruction perpetrated by the unorganized yesterday, the flames that once clung to these ruins had already been ignited by the Alliance's support, as the city began its orderly reconstruction. Busy figures could be seen everywhere, and with the help of Pokémon, the reconstruction work was proceeding smoothly. The harmonious coexistence of humans and Pokémon was fully demonstrated, with each supporting the other. Even the original Alliance competition venue in the center of Mire City was being meticulously rebuilt under the guidance of the Alliance. Indeed, with the support of most of the Alliance's resources and the mobilization of a large number of Pokémon to help with the reconstruction, the venue, gradually being repaired, was expected to be operational again in about 2 or 3 days. SSSS, my head hurts. Who am I? Where am I? In an unnamed room at the Pokémon Center, Yu, who had been comatose all night, finally woke up. Rubbing his still slightly aching head, he quickly took in the surroundings. Isn't this my room in the player's village? And why am I here? I don't remember if I was the one who fought so hard to get Suicune back when those bad guys from Organization S tried to take him away. I wonder what's happening with Suicune and Pikachu now. SSSS, why do my head and body hurt so much? This couldn't help but worry you. After all, the so-called mutual Pokemon they faced yesterday was truly terrifying. Even the Kanto region's Dragon-type King, Tao, and the Kalos region's champion, Karuna, couldn't withstand Mewtwo's 3 moves. Just then, the door opened, and a beautiful figure walked through. You're finally awake. You've been sleeping for almost a whole day. Are you hungry? I'll bring you something to eat. Xiaoxu came to Yu's bed with Vulpix. Xiaoxu, after seeing Xiaoxu come in, Yu no longer understood what had happened. He probably felt some kind of shock at that time, causing him to faint. He didn't know if Yulongzinai and the others had solved the problem and taken him back to the contestants' village, leaving Serena and the other 2 to help take care of him. Xiaoxu, what's going on now? Are Yulongzinai and the others okay? Chapter 1063 Awakening. Yu, I heard you woke up. Don't worry, we're fine. It's just that you're weak, and you were the first one to faint. Yulongzinai and the others had just come to visit Yu. As Yu was asking about Xiaoxu, they pushed open the door and walked in. They were accompanied by Professor Oak, Satoshi, and several others. Satoshi, Professor Oak, Senior Sister, and Zuner, why are you all here? Yu was quite surprised by their appearance. We heard you were about to start the Pokemon League tournament. We came to cheer you on and learn a little bit, Chen Kalen said without hiding anything. You better do your best. You're the hope of Pallet Town this time. Professor Oak was as kind as ever, but if Yu had seen the way he had behaved during the previous battle, he probably wouldn't have the same feelings. You must get well soon. Join me in a Pokemon battle. My strength has improved a lot in the past 2 weeks. Ash, still the same Ash, challenged Yu the first thing he did upon meeting her. However, Ash's spirits were initially high, but Misty dealt him a crushing blow, a cold shower that completely extinguished his spirit. Missy, why did you hit me? Ash protested, displeased with Misty's sudden attack. Ash, can't you be more mature? Don't you know Yu has a very important league match to attend? In this situation, all trainers need to do their best to adjust their Pokemon's condition. How can you easily attack again? You will affect Yu's performance. Ash, Misty is right. There's no rush to challenge Yu. Let's challenge him after his match is over. Xiaomao, Ash's longtime rival, unexpectedly did not engage in a quarrel this time. Instead, he stepped forward and patted his shoulder silently, trying to persuade him. Is that so? After being reminded by his companion, Ash finally came to his senses, but his mood was still very low. Xiaozi, you could actually wait until Yu's league tournament is over before challenging him. Maybe Yu will achieve excellent results by then. With his performance, he'll definitely be in the top 3. Wouldn't it be even more fulfilling to challenge him then? Just then, Xiaoguang approached from the other side and patted Xiaozi on the shoulder. Yet, I never expected that. This time, it wasn't Xiaozi who responded, but Xiaomao, his eyes sparkling. Then, Yu, please have a Pokemon battle with me after the league tournament. I want to see if I've improved in the last 2 weeks and if my changed training methods are working. I really want to know, please, compared to the domineering and arrogant Xiaomao displayed 2 weeks ago, Xiaomao now exuded a more friendly air. And me too. Please do have a Pokemon battle with me then. Xiaozi, unwilling to be outdone, made his request. Okay, I'll grant you all your requests. Though he'd only just woken up, Yu, still a little weak, felt his fighting spirit reignited at the mention of a Pokemon battle. By the way, what happened afterward? After I fell unconscious, Yu was deeply interested in what had happened after he'd lost consciousness. Immediately, everyone shared everything that had transpired since he'd lost consciousness. So, wouldn't it mean the venue was severely damaged? Can the Pokemon League tournament still be held as planned? This was Yu's biggest concern since yesterday's incident. It was all because of the damage he'd already witnessed during yesterday's commotion. But then, hearing how intense the battle had become after he'd lost consciousness, wouldn't that make matters even more serious? Don't worry about that. With the Alliance's full efforts and repairs, it'll probably be officially operational again in just 2 or 3 days. and these 2 or 3 days will be the final days for us contestants to adjust to our current state. As a fellow contestant, Yan Rong had a relatively detailed understanding of the situation. Therefore, he spoke with considerable clarity. But Yu, I have both good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear? Yu Longzhen suddenly spoke up at this moment, a mysterious look on his face. Well, I'll tell you the bad news first. I prefer to experience the bitter first, then the sweet. Huh? That's not right. Shouldn't you hear the good news first? Yu Longzhen was a bit stunned by Yu Yu's somewhat unconventional response, but then he played dirty. But if that's the case, then I'll tell you the good news first. The good news is that due to this sudden unrest, many participating Pokemon trainers have suffered heavy losses. Why do you say that? Yu Yu was clearly curious about this matter. Because of the previous chaos, many Pokemon in the hands of trainers have lost their combat capabilities, and they all have various injuries to varying degrees. Among them, there are countless seriously injured Pokemon. Some trainers were even affected by this chaos and were seriously injured in this state. Therefore, they were unable to participate in the Pokemon battle. Although they felt very sorry for this result, they had to withdraw from the competition. This also caused the number of contestants in this session to drop sharply, about 100 or so. So, is this good news? This is not good news for me. After all, I am a man who aspires to be invincible. You suddenly reduced my opponents so much, what's the point of fighting? Yu did not look as happy as Yu Longzhen had imagined, but looked very sorry. Chapter 1064 Battle Request. Seeing Yu Yu's serious expression, everyone in the room couldn't help but twitch their lips. This only happened to one of Yu Yu's more capable trainers. If it happened to a lesser trainer, it would be like being struck by lightning while trying to show off. Yu Longzhen was at a loss for words for a moment. Hey, keep going. What's the bad news? What's the bad news? Yu Yu couldn't help but urge. The bad news is that due to the incident that occurred this time, the original contestants suffered heavy losses. Therefore, the league has temporarily changed the rules of the match. Initially, no one can play 3 consecutive matches, without rest. The winner of 3 consecutive matches will directly advance to the round of 64. If you win 2 games and lose 1, you have to play again. This will continue until the round of 64 spots are filled. After Yu Longzhen said this, not only him, but also contestants like Xiaozhi and Yan Rong, became extremely solemn. Yu Yu, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation. He simply blinked, looking a bit bewildered. Isn't it just 3 matches in a row with no breaks? Just a small problem, Yu. You probably haven't realized the gravity of this situation yet. The Pokemon trainers and Pokemon who have survived this chaotic yet dangerous situation are almost all exceptional. Not a single one of them is a simple character. Professor Oak seemed to understand the situation and sighed helplessly. It's okay. I have faith in Pikachu and Suicune. Professor Oak, just wait for me to bring back the championship trophy. Xiaomao, Xiaozhi, just wait to challenge me for the championship. Yu, don't brag. The championship this time is definitely mine. You're only worthy of being runner-up at best. No, neither of you can possibly win. Only I can become the champion. It seemed that Yu Yu's confident words had influenced the trainers in the room participating in the league tournament, and the previously gloomy atmosphere suddenly brightened up. Yu Yu's companions and family members, watching the joyful atmosphere, all smiled. By the way, Yu Yu, I have an alliance here, and I have a favor to ask you. What is it, Professor Oak? During yesterday's chaos, the sacred Moltres bird, originally lit for the opening ceremony, was completely destroyed. So chaotic was the situation, even the Moltres flame went out. Professor Oak sounded incredibly helpless as he spoke of this. After all, Moltres flame was the symbol of the island nation, and every regional league tournament was held. And it wasn't just a simple alliance symbol, it could be said to be the legacy of every league tournament. This was only possible because of Moltres flame. I understand. I'll tell Moltres when I get back. Although Professor Oak didn't spell it out, Yu knew what he was trying to say. Really? If that's the case, that's fantastic. I'll leave everything to you. Upon hearing Yu's agreement, Professor Oak breathed a sigh of relief. Afterward, everyone in the room gradually became familiar with each other thanks to Yu, and the room was filled with laughter and joy. Meanwhile, upon learning that Yu Longzhen, Yan Rong, and Xiaozhi were also participating in the Kalos League tournament, Xiaozhi and Xiaomao's eyes lit up and they approached them directly. Faced with Xiaomao and Xiaozi's enthusiasm, even the more mature Yanrong felt overwhelmed. Let alone Yulong Zinai and Xiaozin. However, just as Xiaogang was about to drag the two away, Yanrong, who had been somewhat hesitant, suddenly agreed. Xiaozi, Xiaomao, since you're so eager to play against our team, we can't refuse. So, Yanrong, have you agreed to our match request? Xiaozi was still a little incredulous. His excitement had come so suddenly. But, won't this affect your performance in the tournament? Xiaogang was a little worried. After all, he and Xiaozi had been traveling together for so long, and they had already established a deep friendship. Therefore, Xiaogang was usually quite attentive to Xiaozi and his friends, fearing that Xiaozi's request would have a negative impact on Yanrong. It's okay, it's a small problem. The Pokemon we send out don't have to be top tier. After all, if we were to send them out, it would be difficult for you to win with your current Pokemon strength. Besides, we might gain something from the battle, which would be helpful for the upcoming tournament. Don't you agree? Yanrong chuckled. Xiaozi and Xiaomao's faces, which had been somewhat excited, suddenly darkened for no apparent reason. Well, while we're grateful you agreed to our battle request, and what you said is true, there's no need to say it. Satoshi and Shigeki grew up together, playing in muddy puddles together. Just a glance at each other revealed their true feelings. If anyone dared to look down on them, they'd have to teach them a lesson, show them that the Pallet Town duo are not to be trifled with. Oh, Yanrong, that's a great idea. Count me in. Seeing his best friend say so, Xiaozin immediately agreed. That's a great idea. I'll join in too. Dragon Nobuno also agreed. Is that really okay? Brock still seemed hesitant. No problem, no problem. Don't worry, Brock. It's just a normal Pokemon battle, eh Brock? Shoved aside, watched as Satoshi and Dragon Nobuno walked away, arm in arm. Xiaogang heard that you have recently developed new Pokemon food. Would it be convenient for me to discuss it with you, Ms. Xiaoxu? It is my honor. I will tell you everything I know. Suddenly, Xiaogang, who was originally worried, threw his worries behind him in an instant. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 1065 The opening ceremony ends. How can Yanrong be so powerful? So what? He's so powerful, yet he still plays tricks on us. At this moment, 2 days had passed since Xiaozi and Xiaomao approached Yanrong to challenge him to a Pokemon battle. A lot had happened in those 2 short days. First and foremost was the outcome of the Pokemon battle Xiaomao and Xiaozi had sent to Yanrong and his group. That same day, they immediately engaged in a fierce Pokemon battle in the battle arena in the backyard of the Pokemon Center. Xiaomao and Xiaozi took turns battling Yulong Zinai and the others, believing that even if they couldn't defeat them, they would still be able to cause the most trouble. However, seemingly unsatisfactory results were revealed. Xiaozi and Xiaomao were defeated miserably by the 3 of them. If you had been watching, he would have known the reason. They had agreed not to use their main Pokemon, but in the end, all 3 of them silently used their main Pokemon. It was because they had learned that Ash and Xiao were collecting gym badges for this year's Kanto Region Pokemon League Challenge, and had already collected 5 or 6. This situation inevitably gave them a sense of pressure. They were already so old, and if they lost to Ash again, how would they, the rookie trainers, maintain their dignity? Therefore, they fought them without reservation. Although they didn't send out their strongest Pokemon, the ones they did send out were already bad enough to defeat Ash and Xiao. However, when Ash and the others heard this news, they were furious. For the next few days, seeing the 3 of them was almost unpleasant. Perhaps to avenge their previous defeat, they trained even harder. Taking advantage of this opportunity to be together, they spent the next 2 days enjoying themselves, shopping, and playing games. Or perhaps they'd occasionally hold a few Pokemon battles. Especially in this competitive atmosphere, training Pokemon became even more exciting. Thanks to the combined efforts of workers sent by the Pokemon in the league, the tournament venue, which had been nearly shattered by Organization S, was completely restored. Within 2 days, the Pokemon of the Pokemon trainers had largely recovered after a brief period of recuperation. During this time, the night before the official tournament, Yu fulfilled his promise to Professor Oak and temporarily loaned Moltres. Faced with such sincere requests for help, Moltres readily agreed. Once again, she drew a small spark from her own burning flame and gave it to the league members. Yu was thus honored to be the torchbearer, personally participating in the lighting of the flame at the opening ceremony. With the league tournament's opening ceremony, the intense competition of the Pokémon League tournament officially began tomorrow. This is why Xiaomao and Xiaozhi were watching and chatting in the audience. Because the league tournament was still in the process of selecting the top 64 players, the battlegrounds weren't set in a single location, they were spread out across various areas. This was perhaps to allow the audience to better watch and support their favorite Pokémon trainers, cheering them on. Perhaps because of their previous defeats to Yanrong and his team, Xiaozhi and Xiaomao didn't even attend Yu's matches. Instead, they watched Yanrong's matches, hoping to devise a strategy to counter him. If Yu were to ask about it, they would have a good reason. They had absolute confidence in Yu's abilities and believed he would advance to the top 64. After all, how could Yu, the man who had defeated them, lose? At this moment, Yanrong was already in his third Pokémon battle in the venue. As for why the match was so fast, it was a complete, unsurprising victory. Yanrong, seemingly conserving his strength, or perhaps for some other purpose, had only fielded his main pet, Steelix, throughout the entire match. With just Steelix, he had practically swept both matches. Now, it was the third match. As the rules stated, before the round of 64, every participating Pokémon trainer must participate in consecutive mall Pokémon battles to determine who would advance to the round of 64. Of course, while these three matches were essentially just three Pokémon battles, they were more brutal, almost always decided in a single round. Steelix uses Iron Tail, Kanto uses Arm Punch. It's remarkable that some of the trainers who advanced later on had some strength. Even against Yanrong's Steelix, the opposing Kanto was surprisingly able to hold their own. Although this was partly due to Steelix's considerable stamina from the prolonged battle. It's time to end the fight. Steelix, use your Destruction Ray. Taking advantage of the moment when Kumamoto used his Arm Punch to clash with Iron Tail, he was yanked away by Steelix's rails. Steelix decisively unleashed his Destruction Ray, instantly rendering Kumamoto incapable of fighting. Along with the referee's announcement, a photo of Yanrong lit up on the electronic display. This meant that Yanrong had successfully advanced to the top 64. Brother, you're amazing. You've made it to the top 64 finals. From there, you'll compete for the championship in the top 32, top 16, top 8, and top 4. Yanrong had just emerged from the contestants' tunnel when his younger brother, Yanyi, came over to congratulate him. Glancing at his brother, who seemed a little down at the moment, Yanrong finally reached out and touched his head. Don't be sad, Xiaoyi. Don't be discouraged. Isn't it just that the Pokémon League tournament is cancelled this year? We can participate next year. Or I heard Xiaozhi and the others say that they are preparing to participate in the Pokémon League tournament in the Kanto region right now. If you want, you can also participate. Chapter 1066 Chat? Night fell as expected. Although the official start of the Pokémon League tournament had brought some life back to Mire City, ravaged by Organization S, behind the scenes, people and Pokémon were still bustling with the task of rebuilding. Day and night, or perhaps precisely because of the Pokémon and the hard-working people, Mire City had gradually regained its vibrant, nighttime appearance as a cosmopolitan metropolis. This was especially true since today marked the official Pokémon League tournament, the day of the 64th floor finals. Celebrations could be seen everywhere, in small groups or in large groups with families. Every reputable restaurant in Mire City was packed. For no other reason than that, during the Pokémon League tournament, participating trainers and their families could enjoy free meals at select restaurants. How was the competition today? Needless to ask, Yu has definitely made it to the top 64. Somewhere in Mire City, in an unnamed upscale restaurant, Yu and his group were enjoying dinner around a large round table. It's worth noting that Yulong Zinai and the other three weren't present. After all, this was essentially a private gathering for Yu and his team. Yulong Zinai and the others couldn't bring themselves to attend, as the presence of three outsiders wasn't a big deal. So, they each had their own separate dinners. Yulong Zinai and his brother Du, Xiaoxin, and the brothers Yanrong gathered together. Xiaozhi, are you still ashamed to say that? You and Xiaomao were barely seen all day. You didn't even watch Yu's 3 matches. Why don't you come and see? Xiaoxia put her hands on her hips, looking a little disgruntled. Xiaozi, knowing he was in the wrong, chuckled. Well, let me explain. Xiaomao and I actually went to gather enemy intelligence today. Oh, I didn't expect Xiaozi to learn to gather intelligence on him too. So, what kind of operations did you guys find out today? Professor Oak asked curiously, now also interested. Well, we went to watch the matches of Yulong Zinai, Yanrong, and Xiaoxin respectively. Wait, so you two went to watch the 3 of them and just abandoned Yu? The hot-tempered Xiaoxia once again stood up angrily with her hands on her hips. Xiaoxia, calm down. Listen to what they have to say first. Seeing everyone in the restaurant turn their eyes in their direction, Serena and Xiaoxu, who were already familiar with Xiaoxia, quickly stood up, bowing and apologizing to the people around them, and pulled Xiaoxia back to her chair. Xiaoxia swallowed hard, as if frightened by Xiaoxia's imposing aura. Xiaoxia, who was about to say something, stuttered and couldn't speak. Everyone's attention naturally turned to Xiaomao. Yulong Zinai and the others are truly formidable. In all 3 matches today, they've swept the competition with barely a single Pokémon. Their victories were a foregone conclusion, with not a single setback. Xiaomao then recounted everything he'd witnessed, relentlessly. Well, why are you all looking at me like that? After revealing all the information he'd gathered, Xiaomao realized everyone's attention was focused on him. Isn't that all nonsense? If you'd come to watch Yu's matches, you probably wouldn't have thought it was so impressive. Yu swept all 3 matches with just 1 Pikachu, right? Pikachu. Chen Kalen also stood up, rolling her eyes in annoyance. Having spent some time at Professor Oak's lab, she'd become acquainted with the people in Pallet Town, so she wasn't worried. Pikachu, happily munching on delicious Pokemon food, finally pulled its head out of the pile upon hearing someone call it. Though a bit confused by being called out suddenly, Pikachu understood it was a compliment and smiled happily. Xiaomao was inevitably a bit embarrassed. But, I've seen some Pokemon trainers field 3 different Pokemon in each of their 3 matches, but why do Yanrong and the others just field 1 Pokemon and dominate? Won't Pokemon get tired after so many battles? If they're too tired, wouldn't they lose their stamina in the constant battles? Xiaozi, who had grown considerably during this time, directly asked his question. Ash, that's simply because they're confident in their Pokemon's abilities. Professor Oak was always open to answering questions from his juniors, especially since Xiaozi was a trainer he highly regarded. Therefore, while answering, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Yu, in the previous match, you also sent out a Pokemon to win 3 consecutive games. So, please answer Xiaozi's question. Thinking of not favoring one over the other, Professor Oak turned to test Yu slightly. For Pokemon trainers like them, who are so confident in their own Pokemon, using other Pokemon to perform in this so-called promotion match is simply revealing their cards. You have to know that none of the Pokemon trainers who made it to the top 64 finals are ordinary. If they reveal too much, they will likely be exploited in the subsequent battles, making them a difficult opponent. Yu didn't refuse, and directly expressed his thoughts and ideas. Yu is right, Xiaozi, you still have a lot to learn. This is actually a kind of strategy. Professor Oak clearly agreed with Yu's conclusion and then gave him some advice. Xiaomao, you've made the right choice this time. You should definitely watch the league tournament carefully. You might learn a lot from it, and it will be very helpful to you. Chapter 1067 Comfort. Due to the intense competition during the top 64, the league gave the next qualifying players a day of rest, perhaps to help them build up their form. After all, the upcoming league tournaments would be even more intense, with virtually no rest and the pressure to keep fighting. While later battle leagues typically allow trainers and Pokemon a day or 2 to rest and recuperate, these 2 days were essentially dedicated to Pokemon recuperation. The advantage of having a large number of Pokemon was evident during this time, but for those with higher strength, the situation was less so. After a day of intense activity, the league's top 64 tournament officially began. Yu had previously dominated 3 battles with just 1 Pikachu, so he hadn't suffered much damage. Pikachu allowed him to rest for the upcoming battles, allowing him to send out other Pokemon. The rules for the top 64, top 32, and top 16 tournaments were virtually identical. Each team could only send out 3 Pokémon to battle. When all 3 Pokémon on one side were defeated, the other team was victorious. The quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals were all 6-on-6 matches. Meanwhile, the round of 64, round of 32, and round of 16 were all held in 4 separate arenas, divided directly into fields A, B, and D. This time, Xiaomao and Xiaozhi stopped running around and sat with Professor Oak and his group. Because Yuyu's match number was later, he watched the others from the stands. The first battle in Field D happened to be between Nobuo Urayu and an unknown Pokemon trainer. Although it was only the round of 64, the atmosphere in the arena was already extremely heated, with cheers rising and falling. Although Yuyu hadn't experienced this kind of scene before, as he sat in the stands watching Nobuo Urayu engaging in a fierce battle with his opponent in the arena below, he felt an inexplicable surge of emotion, his entire body trembling. "Yuyu, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell?" Air, sitting next to him, was the first to notice something was wrong with Yuyu and gently placed her hand on his. "No," Yuyu denied repeatedly, not wanting to overwhelm those around him. "Ah. Yuyu, you're not nervous, are you?" Serena also leaned over, and with the same tacit understanding, she placed her hand on Yuyu's other hand. I guess so," although he hated to admit it, Yuyu nodded honestly. "After all, it's my dream to participate in a Pokemon League tournament. I dream of one day standing on the battlefield, under the watchful eyes of thousands. Even standing on the podium, holding the championship trophy high, this was the latest achievement Yuyu had longed to achieve since becoming a Pokemon trainer. This dream he had always wanted to achieve, but now, so close, he felt a little insecure. "Don't worry, Yuyu, we believe you can succeed." No unnecessary words were spoken, but silence spoke louder than words. Feeling the warmth of 2 small hands radiating from his palms, Yuyu's nervousness seemed to ease a little. Time passed slowly, and the sun, which had originally been at its zenith for the early morning competition, was now at its zenith. Okay, it's my turn next." Since his competition zone also happened to be closed, with a battle on the field above nearing its end, Yuyu was about to head to the players' tunnel. However, just as he was about to stand, a force radiating from both sides of his arms made him hesitate for a moment. "What's wrong with you?" Yuyu was about to ask something else when he suddenly felt a warm touch on both sides of his cheek. Yuyu was stunned for a moment. Although he couldn't see it, he could vaguely sense something through touch. Just as he was about to turn around, the same soft touch on his right cheek was immediately felt, but this time it was slightly different from the previous one. "Serena, you guys," Yuyu was about to investigate the 2 culprits, but his words were cut short when Xiaoxu suddenly appeared on his left. "Xiaoxu, Yuyu, you must do your best in the next match." As if nothing had happened, the women cheered Yuyu on. Yet, Yuyu, still a little dazed by the sudden incident, became determined after receiving encouragement from the 3 women and his friends. He looked towards the center of the battlefield. "Let's go, Pikachu. We must win the final victory." Pikachu leaped from Professor Oak's arms in the rear of the battle onto Yuyu's shoulder. Sensing the ambition radiating from his master, Pikachu, even in his invisibility, was filled with fighting spirit. It and its trainer had waited for this moment for far too long, along with its companions. Because the battle was just a few days away, Yuyu, out of caution, had handed Pikachu to Professor Oak beforehand, asking him to check on Pikachu. This was a bit like last-minute cramming. Although Yuyu had always had great faith in his Pokemon and their abilities, just as he had been nervous earlier, in this critical moment, he was even more cautious, seeking to play it safe. This was also why Pikachu hadn't made any noises to disrupt the previous prophet. Little did he know, Pikachu was already watching in astonishment from the seat behind him. But all that was beside the point. Yuyu was now checking his own condition one last time, to make sure he hadn't missed anything. After one final check that everything was okay, he finally set out for the final battle. Chapter 1068. The Top 64 tournament begins. Gyarados, use 100,000 volts. In Zone D, at the Pokemon League tournament, Yuyu issued his final command. Gyarados unleashed a 100,000 volt charge on his Strider. Strider, already on the verge of losing its ability to fight, was instantly rendered incapacitated without a second thought. Strider is incapacitated. As the referee's words fell, Yuyu's fellow 64-player round of 64 players immediately retracted their Striders. The opponent is truly formidable. With just one Gyarados, They've already cost me 2 Pokémon. Only one left. If I lose again, I'll miss the promotion tournament, let alone the championship. The player seemed deeply resigned. However, facing the overwhelming power of Gyarados, his resentment gave way to a deep sense of powerlessness. The Gyarados before him was simply too formidable. In the first of the 2 previous battles, a single attack had already rendered his Pokémon incapacitated. In the second match, while his Strider Frog performed much better than the first, it ultimately lost its combat effectiveness. Meanwhile, the opposing Gyarados looked completely unaffected. I've got no other choice, so I'll have to ask you for once. Piscator, though he seemed incredibly reluctant, the contestant still had to send his Pokémon into battle, lest the referee deem it a forfeit. Are you sending Piscator this time? Are you planning a clash of strength? They're truly a formidable opponent, worthy of advancing to the round of 64. Their strength is truly impressive. In that case, Gyarados, I'll ask you for once. Gyarados, upon hearing that his trainer hadn't withdrawn him and instead sent out his other companions, Gyarados was incredibly excited. Today, he could finally fight to his heart's content. This stage was entirely his. Especially upon seeing the opponent's newly dispatched opponent, Gyarados felt his blood boiling. He looked like a formidable foe. Especially the armor draped across his body, the muscles brimming with power. If they collided, wouldn't a burst of power be exhilarating? Completely impatient, Gyarados didn't even need his trainer's command, swirling his massive frame and launching an attack. He couldn't wait to feel the impact, the clashing of strength, the clashing of flesh and blood between macho men. Faced with Gyarados' unannounced attack, the opposing trainer was clearly a bit slow to react. At this moment, even the trainer hadn't reacted, let alone Bascadora. He was completely stunned by the opponent's imposing aura. So, what was Gyarados' situation like right now? This is what Bascadora's perspective showed. At this moment, Gyarados seemed to be in heat. Seeing the peerless mother Gyarados, already impatient, frightened Bascadora, who involuntarily curled his tail around a vital part of his body. However, in this situation, Bascadora was forced to launch a counterattack. However, it was as if Bascadora had been provoked by Gyarados. He chose not to respond. Facing Gyarados' attack, Bascadora's helmet-like head shone with a metallic white light. He unleashed his Iron Head skill and charged head-on into Gyarados. Facing Bascadora's fierce attack, which could have flattened a mountain, Gyarados became even more excited. Halfway through the charge, his entire body flashed with golden light. Amidst this golden radiance, Bascadora had already rushed in, attacking Gyarados relentlessly. The sudden, intense golden light caused those watching to experience a slight flash of blindness. Whether it was the trainers inside or the spectators in the stands, there was only a deafening thud, followed by a silence. Once their eyes had fully adjusted, they all focused on the battle scene, followed by gasps. After the shock subsided, there were enthusiastic cheers. Gyarados, still radiating a golden glow, was the only thing visible. Bascadora's head pressed firmly against Gyarados', leaving a deep dent beneath Gyarados' plow, demonstrating the immense force of Bascadora's Iron Head attack. However, even this force was completely withstood by Gyarados, whose body still shone with a faint golden glow. Gyarados, while the others gasped and stared in shock, facing the onslaught of Bascadora, Gyarados' only remaining emotion was excitement, immense excitement. Finally, someone to beat. Even though he'd won the entire match today, he was incredibly happy. But even that required an opponent of equal strength. The first of the 2 previous matches had been incredibly boring, and the second was barely a warm-up. Only this one, against Bascadora, was a true battle between male Pokémon. Let's fight like true male Pokémon. Gyarados. At this point, Gyarados roared once more, a matter-of-fact roar. He ignored Bascadora's surprise, still hovering above him, and simply twisted his massive frame. The dragon's tail whipped directly towards Bascadora's head. Because Bascadora still maintained an upward posture, the dragon's tail also whipped directly into Bascadora's head from top to bottom. Bascadora, you have lost your ability to fight. Chapter 1069, Gyarados' Strangeness. Bascadora, incapacitated. When the referee finally announced the result, the atmosphere, once boiling with activity, instantly quieted. No one could have imagined that Bascadora, so imposing just moments ago, having sent Gyarados reeling with a single Iron Head move, would be rendered incapacitated by Gyarados' tail strike. Putting aside the preconceived notion of Boscadora, the helmet-like ornament on his head couldn't offer any additional defense. Just take the Iron Head strike from that hardened head for example, it exuded such power and momentum. But after being struck by Gyarados' tail strike, he was instantly rendered incapacitated. He offered no resistance or struggle, he was decisively rendered incapacitated. Night fell once again in the Kalos region, shrouding the entire land in darkness. In the nightfall, the bustling atmosphere of Mire City far from diminished. Instead, it became even more lively thanks to today's round of 64 tournament. It was practically a city that never sleeps. Street vendors could be seen everywhere, and the surrounding shops were ablaze with neon lights. People and Pokémon were constantly coming and going. In this bustling atmosphere, walking along West Street, one could often hear people discussing the upcoming round of 64 matches. Meanwhile, television was broadcasting various reports about the round of 64. But even more were profiles of the top 32 players who had advanced from the round of 64. There were even interviews with several players who had advanced from the round of 32. You, come eat quickly. Don't train anymore. Eat first. You can't train well on an empty stomach. Although Yu and his companions were in the players' village, they faced many restrictions. However, thanks to Professor Oak's connections, the league staff in the players' village gave Professor Oak and his group a separate room. This demonstrates Professor Oak's status within the entire island nation's Pokémon League, and it's clear that his position is truly exceptional. It's almost safe to say that Professor Oak holds a pivotal position within the Pokémon League. While he doesn't hold any real power, those who do have it often give him respect. Thanks to Professor Oak's special care, Yu was able to move from their original room to a separate floor from Professor Oak and his group. This building, located in the players' village, resembles a small villa. While small, this villa is fully equipped. It has every amenity you could possibly need, and even the food is provided by a dedicated staff member. Perhaps due to their usual habit, while there are people to help with food provision, Xiaoguang, Xiaoxu, and the others still cook their own delicious meals. Pokémon food, in particular, is of paramount importance to Pokémon breeders like them. What delicious food did you cook today? I could already smell it when I was outside. Yu rushed in immediately after hearing the call for dinner. He was truly looking forward to the food Xiaoguang and Xiaoxu had prepared. It was so delicious that it's no exaggeration to say that even the chefs at 5-star restaurants couldn't replicate its flavor. Yu, what's wrong with Gyarados? Normally, isn't calling for dinner the most positive thing it does? Why does it seem so listless now? Xiaoxu, who had just served delicious Pokémon food to the battleground outside the room, returned and pulled up a chair next to Yu, sitting down and asking curiously. Huh? Is it sick? I'll go check it out. Professor Oak was shocked to hear that Gyarados was ill. He immediately pulled up a chair and wanted to go out to check on it. However, before he could leave, Yu stopped him. Professor Oak, don't worry about that brat. Hurry and eat first. The food Xiaoxu and Xiaoguang cooked is really delicious. If you are a little slow, it'll all be gone. While a Pokémon research professor isn't exactly a Pokémon doctor, it's no exaggeration to say that anyone who becomes a Pokémon research professor has a knowledge of Pokémon's physical condition that's almost as good as any Pokémon's in their lifetime. Yu certainly believed that Professor Oak had the ability, but what Professor Oak gave him was another matter. Professor Oak had long been drooling over the food Xiaoguang and Xiaoxu had prepared. After all, I don't eat instant noodles every day. Even though instant noodles come in a variety of flavors, it still feels like instant noodles. Now that he finally had the opportunity to eat a good meal, he certainly didn't want to miss it. However, faced with a Pokémon issue, between the two options, he ultimately preferred to investigate Gyarados' current situation. Professor Oak, you really don't need to go see that Gyarados kid. Yu didn't give Professor Oak any time to refuse, forcing him down onto the chair. Yu, as Gyarados' trainer, don't you already know what's going on? Despite being forced down by Yu, Professor Oak had a vague idea of what Yu's purpose was. Yu, are you serious? At Professor Oak's suggestion, the others piqued their interest, their eyes fixed on him, their eyes shifting to the food. Sigh, that's a bit embarrassing. Gyarados wasn't acting like this because he was unwell. It was because he hadn't fought enough. No, to be more precise, Gyarados was very dissatisfied with the final battle with Boscadora. I only figured it out later. I guess it was because of Boscadora that Gyarados' combat power was maximized, but in the end, Boscadora was found to be a mere shell. Now he has no way to vent his fighting spirit. Chapter 1070 Battle Match. Upon hearing that Gyarados had become like this under these circumstances, everyone in the room looked at each other in bewilderment. What kind of magical Pokemon were these in Yu's possession? Their personalities were truly remarkable. Yu, why don't you just let Gyarados discover it? It's not good to keep it contained like this. Xiaoguang, a mature man, immediately offered his opinion. Well, Xiaoguang is right. From a psychological perspective, Gyarados should definitely be allowed to vent. Professor Oak stroked his chin, a thoughtful expression on his face. No, I don't think so, Yu disagreed, a slight twitch of his lips. In that case, you must be careful not to overdo it with Gyarados. Professor Oak was still relatively confident in Yu, but he couldn't help but offer some caution. Well, after dinner, I'm planning on going to the registration office to draw my next round opponents. Only after the round of 16 are the matches assigned randomly via electronic displays. Before the round of 16, the assignments are almost always done manually, like drawing lots. Then I'll go with you, Air volunteered. Yu agreed without hesitation. After dinner, the two of them left for the registration office. Although the round of 64 had concluded, the registration office was still bustling at night. This was because the Pokemon trainers and contestants used it as a makeshift forum, flocking here for whatever reason to discuss Pokemon battles, or to secretly gather information about their upcoming opponents. Yu, you're so slow, Yulong's I couldn't help but complain. Sorry, I ate a few extra bowls of rice. Hey, why isn't your brother with you? Don't mention that. My brother was called away by the Kalos Pokemon League on a whim, Yulong's I led Yu to counter. Upon seeing them arrive, the counter staff immediately handed them two objects resembling coins. After receiving the coins, Yulong's I immediately dragged Yu to pinball machine. Yu, even if we meet, I definitely won't hold back, that's how it should be. I'll definitely give it my all, a fight neither of us will regret. Before inserting the coins, the two exchanged a smile. The gentle clash of fists was a testament to the rivalry between the two young men. Yulong's I then inserted the coin first, flicking the pinball machine's balls. The ejected balls eventually landed in an unknown hole. The final result displayed on the screen wasn't a match between Yulong's I and Yu. Yulong's I's opponent was an unknown Pokemon trainer. While both were somewhat disappointed by the outcome, they couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Neither of them had really wanted to see each other right now. Haha Yu, it seems we'll just have to wait until the round of 16, don't be the first to be eliminated then, or I'll be feeling quite lonely, Yu teased Yulong's I with a smile, manipulating his pinball machine. Don't worry, we're formidable rivals. It's not easy for either of us to be eliminated before we've met, Yulong's I said with a smile, while also checking the screen, curious about who Yu's next opponent would be. This is way too soon, Yulong's I paused his muttering after seeing the match information on the screen, and fell silent. Air gently covered her mouth to muffle any sound, but Mimeng's eyes remained wide, betraying the complexities of her emotions. Yu, I didn't expect to face you so soon. But it's a good thing. I've wanted to have a Pokemon battle with you for a long time, but I just never got a chance. Now, let me teach you a lesson. You bastard, how dare you kidnap my sister? A gnashing voice rang out from the side. Xiaozin had already spotted Yu, who had also been matched with the rival. To be honest, Xiaozin was also surprised to be matched with Yu. However, he had no feelings for Yu at all. Who told him to kidnap his sister? Look, the little cabbage he had raised for so many years was about to be taken away by the pig in front of him. Whenever he thought of this, Xiaozin would feel a surge of jealousy for no apparent reason. Brother, what are you talking about? I won't pay attention to you if you keep acting like this. Air was initially a little shocked, but after hearing what her brother said, her face turned red with shame. She couldn't help but stamp her feet, puffing out her cheeks and glaring at her brother with dissatisfaction. After being told this by her sister, Xiaozin suddenly felt a little flustered. She quickly admitted her mistakes and tried to please Air. Brother, Yu, after all, he was her brother, and Air quickly chose to forgive Xiaozin after he begged for mercy. However, her heart was still a little complicated. After all, The thought of her brother and her sweetheart about to confront each other made Air feel caught in the middle and very uncomfortable. However, before Air could finish her words, Xiaozin was like a cat whose tail was stepped on and completely exploded. Impossible, absolutely impossible. You actually deceived you, I will never let him off. From now on, the Pokemon battle will be a fight between you and me, brother. Air was obviously a little angry at this time, with her hands on her hips and glaring at him with her beautiful eyes. Okay, for your sake. When the Pokemon battle comes, I will let you give in. Xiaozin was still a little afraid of her younger sister after all. No need. If you have the ability, then fight me with all your strength. What's the point of just talking? Win is win, lose is lose, there is no such thing as modesty in Pokemon battles. You refused very bluntly. It depends on your ability. Chapter 1071. The 32 rounds begin. 2 days flew by. The final 32 matches had begun. After a protracted battle that lasted almost 2 or 3 hours, it was finally time for the magical treasure battle between Xiaozin and Yu. Yanrong, Air, and the others were already seated in the audience, eagerly awaiting the start of the battle. Because they were all familiar with each other, they gathered together. It was clear that no one present wanted to see this outcome, but they had to see it, as it was a necessary step towards the championship. Therefore, everyone had mixed emotions. Let's not discuss the thoughts of the audience for now. On the field, with the referee's command, the match was about to begin. The first step was the drawing of the courts. The symbols representing the 4 courts, water court, grass court, ice court, and rock court, flashed continuously. Ultimately, the decision settled on the grass court. The grass court was arguably the most common of the 4. After the referee once again explained the rules, both teams began choosing who'd attack first. Xiaozin was given the first spot. His first Pokemon was Nidoking. Nidoking, a power-type Pokemon? If so, it's yours. Gyarados. Without hesitation, Yu sent out Gyarados, who had already appeared yesterday. Nidoking, use Buster Beam. Gyarados, will use Buster Beam too. Gyarados was incredibly excited that his trainer had sent him into battle again. After all, after being sent out yesterday, there was a high probability that he wouldn't be sent out again. Instead, he would send out other companions. But he hadn't expected to be picked out. Yesterday wasn't enough fun, so today he'd have a good fight. Hopefully, the big guy on the other side wouldn't be a mere empty shell like yesterday's. He silently prayed, but Gyarados didn't let up. Destruction Beam clashed with Destruction Beam, one pushing forward slightly, the other pushing forward a bit more. For a moment, the outcome seemed almost undecided. The collision of the two skills unleashed a powerful explosion, sending gusts of air surging towards the Pokemon on both sides. Because both Pokemon simultaneously unleashed Destruction Beam, they were both negatively affected by Destruction Beam, momentarily paralyzed. During this period of immobility, the battle became a battle of which Pokemon could first break free of the negative effects and launch an attack on the other. Nidoking uses Megaton Punch. What? Ignoring the stunned expressions of the crowd, Nidoking, still negatively affected, heard his trainer's command and, amidst the trembling earth, swiftly launched an attack towards Gyarados. How is it possible to just destroy the Death Ray and then immediately follow up with another attack? Yu was puzzled. It wasn't just him, even the audience was puzzled. Air, it seems your brother has put a lot of effort into Nidoking. He's able to let you play with him so much and control him so well. Even Professor Oak couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, but the others around him didn't bother to reply. Their eyes were fixed on the field. Facing the attack launched by Yu, Gyarados, finally freed from the negative effects, showed no fear at all, but rather an increased excitement. Nidoking was closing in on Gyarados, but Gyarados had already launched an attack. He unleashed his Dragon Tail, intending to meet Nidoking's Megaton Punch head-on. Both Pokemon were power types. The ensuing battle was a relentless barrage of blows, each one a tail and the other a punch. Dull, thud-like sounds, like blows, emanated from their bodies. Perhaps this was a common problem among power-type Pokemon. Despite their immense strength, they preferred melee combat. However, this melee combat suited Gyarados perfectly. Gyarados, Nidoking's heavy fists repeatedly struck him. Far from feeling any discomfort, Gyarados grew increasingly excited. Finally encountering a worthy opponent, Gyarados unleashed the fighting spirit he had fueled all night. With a surge of energy, Nidoking, which had been fighting back and forth, was now losing ground. Gyarados, I suppose you've vented enough. Use Water Pillar Tail, but it was too late for Nidoking to withdraw. Water Pillar Tail struck directly at Nidoking, radiating the immense power of the giant beast, and the attack itself possessed a water-based counter. Under the combined power of these extraordinary effects, Nidoking's heavy body began to fly backwards. Its iron-hard skin had left deep scars on the grass battlefield. Looking through the scar, which stretched almost the entire length of the battlefield, one could see that the once vibrant Nidoking was now completely incapacitated. Not bad, quite capable. Xiaozhi had heard from others before that Xiaoyu was a formidable Pokémon trainer. But only after experiencing it firsthand could one truly grasp the true meaning. Xiaoyu remained silent throughout, as if oblivious to Xiaozhi's praise. Metallic, then I'll leave this to you. Are you sure the water-type Metallic is fighting in the ugly battlefield? Xiaoyu frowned, then spoke hesitantly. Don't worry about that. Don't forget, we're rivals now. Xiaozhi clearly had his own plans. Although Nidoking was defeated by Gyarados, it probably consumed a lot of its physical strength. So this time I will send out Metagross, which is good at physical strength and defense. It should be able to completely wear out the opponent's Pokémon. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 1072 Hedgehog Tactics. Send out Metagross this time? Then I'll leave Gyarados to you once more. After some thought, Xiaoyu decided to send out Blastrong to continue the fight. Indeed, as Xiaozhi had thought, after the intense melee with Nidoking, Gyarados had indeed consumed a lot of energy, but that energy should be enough for Gyarados to barely sustain it through this battle. Gyarados, use 100,000 volts. Metagross, use Freeze Beam. Gyarados, use Jet Flame. Metagross, use Shell. Jet Flame had little effect on the already shrinking Metagross. Gyarados, it looks like you're going for melee again. Gyarados, go. Gyarados, perhaps influenced by Xiaoyu, most of his Pokémon had a particular fondness for close combat. Gyarados excitedly used his impact skill, slamming into the shrunken Metagross. However, perhaps having retracted itself into its shell, without the support of the powerful force of the oxtail, the once upright shell began to tilt haphazardly to the side. Under Gyarados' impact, the massive shell only moved back a meter. After that, there was no further movement. Gyarados, clearly dissatisfied with this outcome, continued its charge, unleashing Thunder Fang and biting down hard on the shell. However, aside from the inherent hardness of Oxtail's shell, the mere use of the retracted shell enhanced Oxtail's defenses. While Thunder Fang, being an electrical element, was highly effective against water-based Oxtail, sheltered within its sturdy shell, seemed unfazed. This, however, only further infuriated Gyarados. Faced with Oxtail's defensive stance, Gyarados felt insulted. He'd had a blast beating the previous one, but when it came to this one, it cowered, refusing to fight head-on. How could this be? Gyarados' tempers rose once again, and he should have let out some of the excitement from yesterday's battle. But right then, Metagross's defense proved difficult to break. So, in this rage, Gyarados abandoned all hope, intent on beating this coward, Metagross, with the most primitive and brutal methods. His tail lashed out again and again, the sound of steel clashing echoing. Each blow from his tail produced a dull thud, but Metagross's shell's defense was incredibly strong, and even this intense barrage of attacks only resulted in a rebound. Metagross, good chance to use Water Cannon. He took advantage of Gyarados' moment of rest, exhausted from the constant barrage. Originally hidden within the shell, Metapod launched a counterattack. Caught off guard, Gyarados was flung backward by the force of the Water Cannon. Gyarados, though furious, was also exhausted. Unable to sustain its attacks, it was running low on stamina. Metapod, on the other hand, remained on the defensive. While the constant barrage of attacking the dragon's tail might have drained Metapod's stamina, it wasn't excessive. Especially now, with the opportunity to counterattack, Gyarados was in a particularly difficult position. If he attacked, the opponent would immediately defend. The slightest sign of exhaustion or a flaw would trigger a counterattack. It was like a hedgehog Pokémon, completely unable to strike back. Alright, you're awesome. Gyarados, I'm sure you've let off some steam after these 2 battles today. Then, go back to your Pokeball and rest. You didn't care whether Gyarados agreed or not, and simply sent out his crab. Switching Pokemon? Good, my tactics are working. Although Xiaozhi usually had a bitter rivalry with Yu and acted contemptuously, this was all superficial. Deep down, he had a deep faith in Yu's abilities. Therefore, as soon as he knew his next opponent would be Yu, he had already begun researching his battles. He even questioned Yanrong and Yulong Zinai, 2 trainers Yu had battled before. Even his sister, Ayer, was pestered by Xiaozhi, hoping to extract more information about Yu. However, Ayer considered this a somewhat unreasonable request for her brother, and she righteously refused. Xiaozhi kept muttering to herself after that, like a complete traitor. She wasn't even married yet, and yet she treated her brother this way. Gorilla, show them your strength. That Yu kid is a bit too extreme. Why are all the Pokemon he has leaning towards power types? As the trainer of Metagross, Xiaozhi was of course aware of Metagross's weaknesses. Use Bubble Beam, Metagross, keep using Shell. The stream of bubbles was simply blocked by Metagross's hard shell. For Metagross, with its formidable defense, the stream of bubbles was like a tickle. Or even less than a tickle. However, Gorilla's goal wasn't to use Bubble Beam to harm Metagross. It was to give Gorilla ample opportunity to get close to Metagross. Gorilla, it's time. Use Crab Punch. With a swirling fist, Storyline swung his massive claws like a massive hammer. He kept hitting the shell of the Metagross. Because the giant crab had undergone special training before. Therefore, he was not afraid of the hedgehog-like tactics of the Metagross. The crab fists kept hitting at a very high frequency, punch after punch. The sound of thumping like beating a war drum kept coming out, but the Metagross in the shell remained unmoved. It's useless. The defense of Metagross can be said to be the most powerful defense I have ever seen except for Blastoise. Chapter 1073 Gyarados Defeat. It's useless. Mystic Shell's defense is arguably the strongest I've ever seen. Aside from Blastoise, Xiaozhi was absolutely confident in his own Scimitar's defense. But the more he insisted, the more Yu doubted it. If Yu, a Pokemon trainer, was so stubborn, then his Pokemon were even more stubborn, never giving up on something they'd set their minds to. Take, for example, the Scimitar before him. He believed his crab punches could shatter the shell, a defensive shell comparable to tortoises. With his persistence, the Scimitar even seemed to be grasping the legendary Clear Sky Hammer technique, the Chaos Cloak Hammer technique. With continuous blows, especially from the Scimitar, he employed a more refined and rough attack, targeting a specific point on the Scimitar's shell. Finally, his efforts paid off, and with a crisp sound like shattering glass, a crack appeared. If one were to look at the Scimitar at this moment, one would see cracks forming on its shell. Perhaps the spectators, at such a distance, couldn't detect anything amiss with Metal Baby. But Xiaozhi, Metal Baby's trainer, sensed it clearly. Looks like we have no choice but to fight. Metal Baby, use Clamp, Crocodile, continue using Crab Punch. Upon receiving the command, Crocodile continued its Crab Punch attack, targeting Metal Baby, which had just opened its shells. However, Metal Baby was quick-witted and quick-handed. Earth Horse closed its shells just as Crab Punch struck. The powerful force sent Metal Baby flying backward. Just as Yu ordered Crocodile to pursue the attack, Xiaozhi finally smiled. Metal Baby, use Shell Break, then Freeze Beam. What? Yu hadn't even realized what was happening before him. He felt a blanket of ice and snow covering his face. By the time he realized what was happening, Crocodile had already lost his fighting ability. What the hell? Yu finally recovered after his initial shock. What a plan. I didn't expect you to have such a trick. Looks like I underestimated you. Yuyu's expression turned grim. He had never expected Xiaozhi to let Metagross use Shell Break, instantly converting its increased defense into attack power. Caught off guard, coupled with Metagross's previous defense, the increased defense converted into an equivalent attack power. Even if the plot had taken precautions, it would certainly be incapable of fighting. In that case, Gyarados, I'll leave you to it once more. Gyarados, although completely confined to its Pokeball, Gyarados could still sense the external environment to some extent. However, even with a previous experience with a Crabard, Gyarados remained undaunted. Upon its appearance, it launched a decisive attack with Destruction Beam. However, Metagross, now with its defense and attack power equalized, showed no sign of fear. It immediately countered with Freeze Beam and Destruction Beam. The clash of the two skills was, for a moment, evenly matched. Just as the two equally powerful skills collided, creating an explosion, a figure suddenly burst through the aftermath, bursting forth with unstoppable momentum, then unleashed a Thunder Fang attack on Cheetah. In a split second, Cheetah, who had been brimming with pride at having instantly defeated Skagit, was instantly rendered incapable of combat. Thank you for your hard work, Cheetah. I'll leave this to you. With the battle reaching such a frenzied state, Xiaozhi finally dispatched his last Pokémon. Who else could have emerged but Greninja? Greninja takes the initiative, using Swallow Return. Greninja displayed incredible explosive power, reaching Gyarados in mere seconds, and with a knee strike and a sidekick, he already had the upper hand. Fortunately, Gyarados' defenses were formidable enough to completely block this sudden burst of attacks. But even if Gyarados had attempted another attack, it was too late. Greninja, leveraging the explosive power of Swallow Return, had already put some distance between itself and Gyarados. What a formidable creature. If this is the case, we must make a quick decision. Greninja Mega Evolves. The Mega Evolved Greninja appeared immediately in full view. However, the Kalos region was home to the most Mega Evolutions of Pokémon, and the audience in the stands were accustomed to this sight. Only a few visitors from other regions were particularly excited after witnessing it. Is this guy going to go all out like this right from the start? Yu was somewhat taken aback by Xiaozin's decisive attitude. But these were all other people's choices. Things had come to this point, and Yu wasn't going to sit back and wait for death. Even if he agreed, Gyarados probably wouldn't. Gyarados, a series of deafening roars erupted. Even against Greninja, whose aura had noticeably increased after its Mega Evolution, Gyarados remained undaunted, launching the first attack. You're truly clueless. In that case, Greninja, let me show you what you're capable of. Use Water Shuriken, Tisk. It's just a Mega Evolution. What's so great about that? Gyarados, use Destruction Beam. The Destruction Beam was launched, but the Water Shuriken needed to be more flexible against the straight attack of the Destruction Beam. Using the linear barrier formed by the Destruction Beam as its center point, the Water Shuriken began to spin relentlessly. Finally, it struck Gyarados, who had been temporarily immobilized by the Destruction Beam. Perhaps due to the immense stamina consumed by the two previous battles, Gyarados offered no resistance to the Water Shuriken attack. With remarkable decisiveness, he instantly lost his ability to fight and fell to the ground, his eyes swirling. Okay, now we're back to a tie. In a one-on-one decision situation, what are you going to send out? Chapter 1074 Victory. Since Pikachu can't be deployed right now, we can only use a few other Pokémon. However, aside from Suicune, it seems these other powerful Pokémon are mostly Fire-type, and they'd likely be at a disadvantage against the Water-type Greninja. While attribute antagonism doesn't necessarily determine the outcome of a Pokémon battle, attributes are certainly crucial. But if that's the case, then it's you, Suicune. Yu considered it carefully before sending out Suicune. This situation also made Yu realize that his Pokémon were insufficient, and also a bit out of line. Suicune, use Water Cannon. Compared to the Mega Evolution, the appearance of the legendary Suicune brought the atmosphere to a new level. Suicune. Greninja uses Water Shuriken. Xiaozin's expression was now grave, no longer the relaxed and confident look he had just had. Suicune answered my call and Mega Evolved. Yu also immediately unleashed his ultimate. While aiming for a quick victory, he also sought stability. Suicune, use high-speed movement to evade. Then use Freeze Beam. Just as the Shuriken was about to strike, Suicune nimbly dodged, using high-speed movement to increase his speed. The Freeze Beam was launched directly from the side at Greninja. Swallow Return, using the powerful explosive power of the Swallow Return, the thickened Dragon Bay dodged the Freeze Beam attacks again and again. AI Slash, with a flick of his wrist, two small dagger-like rays of light instantly condensed and flashed to Suicune's head, slashing directly at him. Suicune, use Blizzard, then Ice Fang. A blizzard of area of effect damage instantly enveloped the entire battlefield. Under the relentless blizzard, even Greninja, with its immense explosive power, had to slow down to withstand the damage. Taking advantage of Greninja's resistance, he slowed down. Suicune's Ice Fang had already arrived, and without hesitation, he bit Greninja. Just as Greninja was about to strike with his AI slash after being bitten by Suicune, Suicune flung him into the air and then launched another ice beam towards Greninja. Use Shadow Clone. In the critical moment, Greninja, receiving the order from its trainer, immediately conjured up clones of itself. Will it work? Don't forget, we're still in the blizzard. What? As expected, as the blizzard continued to blow, Greninja's previously dispersed shadow clones were instantly shattered. As the remaining shadow clones gradually dissipated, Greninja's true form was finally exposed. Seizing his opportunity, Suicune didn't hesitate at all. He pounced, Ice Fang bared, and tore into Greninja's body. Greniclear uses Swallow Return. Greninja, no pushover, saw Suicune bite it, yet it too unleashed Swallow Return, a high-burst attack. Swallow Return's damage was even greater in close combat. Suicune was instantly sent flying with a kick. Suijin, use Freeze Beam. The kicked Suicune, unwilling to be outdone, launched a Freeze Beam directly at Greninja, who had just landed. Greninja, watching the Freeze Beam approach, could only raise its hands to block. However, the Freeze Beam not only inflicted damage but also froze its hands. What? Xiaozhi was shocked. Yu, on the other hand, looked surprised. Suicune, good chance to use Water Cannon, because Greninja's hands were frozen and bound by the Freeze Beam. Most of its abilities were blocked, as most of its abilities required the use of both hands. Greninja, use Shadow Clone. Then Swallow Return, with its hands bound. Even if Greninja wanted to use its skills to break the ice, it would be difficult. Therefore, Xiaozhi could only order Greninja to dodge the attacks. However, Greninja's shadow clones were once again ineffective against Suicune. With a sweep of the Water Cannon, Greninja's shadow clones vanished. His true form was even knocked back by the Water Cannon, but he quickly regained his balance with Swallow Return. Suicune, having already secured his attack, wouldn't give Greninja time or opportunity to react. He launched another Freeze Beam at Greninja. The previous Water Cannon attack had melted the ice from Greninja's hands. Greninja, newly freed, hadn't had much time to rejoice before the Freeze Beam struck again, instantly freezing it. This time, it wasn't just his hands that were bound in ice, it was his entire body. Only his head remained exposed. What, Xiaozhi, you're still too inexperienced after all. I'll take this battle without mercy. Seeing this, Yu finally let out a confident smile. It was true, though. In this situation, no Pokemon could possibly break free, save for Fire-type Pokemon. How can this battle end like this? Greninja, go ahead and bring your all. It's true, a trainer's encouragement to Pokemon is always crucial. Almost every encouragement in adversity pushes a Pokemon to its limits. Just like the Greninja before him, the ice binding it began to crack like spider webs. Then, with a soft sound, it dissolved into icy crystals and scattered. Seeing this, Yu was about to give the order for Suicune to continue his attack, capitalizing on his victory. Greninja, having just broken free from the ice, seemed to have exhausted all its strength. As the ice shattered and clashed, Greninja could no longer maintain its mega-evolved form. Then, under the gazes of the entire audience, Greninja's legs gave way, and it slowly fell to its knees. Greninja has lost its ability to fight. Chapter 1075, Top 16. Yu, you're indeed strong, but this time it was mostly just luck. Next time, you won't be able to do the same. The Pokemon battle between Yu and Xiaozhi concluded, and they emerged from the player's tunnel simultaneously, encountering each other unexpectedly. After beating you once, I'm sure I can beat you a second and third time, Yu exclaimed, his confidence evident. The two of them, bickering with each other, returned to the stands where Air and the others were to watch the next Pokemon battle. Upon Yu's return, he advanced to the round of 16, and naturally, received another round of congratulations. Meanwhile, despite his defeat, Xiaozhi remained remarkably tolerant. However, because of Air, Xiaozhi felt somewhat powerless in front of her younger sister. Therefore, to maintain a sense of presence and status, he and Yu engaged in a ceaseless exchange of words. Air, however, thoughtfully sat beside her brother, fearing he might be feeling down and overwhelmed, and offered gentle comfort. Yanrong also came over, feeling sorry for his good brother's defeat. The round of 32 concluded quickly that day. The next roster for the round of 16 was even freshly released. Yu quickly received the roster and learned his next opponent. Thankfully, Yu's opponent wasn't someone he knew. Yulong Zinai and Yanrong didn't encounter each other, instead facing off against other Pokémon trainers. Afterward, the league allowed the contestants to adjust their schedules for a day or two. The round of 16 took place as scheduled. Compared to the previous rounds of 64 and 32, the round of 16 was noticeably more intense. And as time passed, the excitement surrounding the league tournament didn't cool at all. Instead, it intensified. Many vendors set up shop around the league meeting, hoping to capitalize on the tournament and make a killing. As long as they have enough business acumen, the facts clearly prove that the small vendors who manage to secure a spot at the league venue are all very smart. A dazzling array of merchandise is available for all kinds of players participating in the various league tournaments. As the atmosphere in the league's venue becomes increasingly lively, staff members can be seen everywhere, walking around the audience selling merchandise. Banners of all kinds can be seen everywhere, with everyone cheering on their favorite trainers. The start of the round of 16 matches was still bustling with activity and excitement. However, as the Pokémon battles began, a momentary silence descended. Fearing that their noise would disrupt the performance of the players and their Pokémon on the battlefield, or perhaps even missing out on some exciting battle, they might be inattentive. However, when the battles reached their climax, the enthusiastic cheers from the crowd rose one after another, like waves crashing against the shore, relentless and unending. The round of 16 was an all-out battle, a 6-on-6 Pokémon battle. Yu Yu's luck was exceptional this time, and he got off to a winning start. He was the first to face off. During the 2 days of adjustment, Yu Yu hadn't been idle, learning a lot about his upcoming opponent. He was a trainer specializing in rock-type weapons, primarily focused on strength, making him a formidable opponent. The ensuing battle proved just how formidable he truly was. Initially, Yu Yu, cautious, sent out Gyarados. The opponent, however, sent out Onix. Both Pokémon were equally massive. They both particularly favored close combat, the feeling of physical contact. The muffled thuds of collisions echoed. Both Pokémon were suited to power-type combat, but Gyarados' own attributes offered a counter. Therefore, after several fierce battles, Onix was ultimately defeated by Gyarados. But then Gyarados was directly defeated by the second Pokémon sent out. The second Pokémon sent out was a Rhydon. The impact was so powerful that even Gyarados could barely withstand it. However, Gyarados' sacrifice was not in vain, at least it laid a good foundation for the upcoming battle. With a foundation laid by Gyarados, Yu Yu didn't intend to hide and immediately sent out a Suicune. A single water cannon attack instantly disabled the massive Rhydon. Faced with each of his own Pokémon being incapacitated, the opposing trainer remained undeterred. The third Pokémon sent out was Steelix. Facing Steelix, Yu Yu chose not to let Suicune continue the fight for a 5-match series. Instead, he retracted Suicune into his Pokéball and sent out Charizard, which had a superior stat line. As expected, Charizard and Steelix, two Pokémon at their peak power, clashed. Charizard, with its stat advantage, ultimately triumphed. Because 3 of the opposing Pokémon had already lost their effectiveness, the battle venue had to be changed midway through. Whether it was the opponent's sadness or Yu Yu's sheer luck, the second half battle venue was a water one. This was a disaster for the opposing trainer, a master of rock and ground type Pokémon. However, the opposing trainer had clearly considered this factor. Therefore, the next Pokémon sent out weren't all rock type. The one sent out was a coconut tree. The opposing trainer had clearly anticipated that their rock-type prowess would be outmaneuvered by the other trainers, so they had prepared a grass-type Pokémon that could counter rock types. However, it proved ineffective against Charizard. With a single move, Flame Spray, a Flame Vortex, it instantly destroyed the opposing coconut tree. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.